Chapter 1570. The Yun family's forbidden technique, the dragon-inscribed talisman, was extremely terrifying. Tian had almost died to Black Dragon's talisman, if it were not for the fact that he possessed the sovereign dragon's vein, which allowed him to absorb and fuse with the talisman, as well as the fact that the princess's tear had fused with his blood, allowing his strength to recover instantly. It would have been difficult to say who would have won the battle. Black Dragon had said that the Yun family had 3 great forbidden techniques. The dragon-inscribed talisman was only one of them. Since the cultivators of the Yun family were declining with each generation, why didn't they cultivate the 3 great forbidden techniques? Forbidden techniques? Yin Qing could not help but smile bitterly when he heard Tian mention the 3 forbidden techniques. He said, "The rules of the Yun family state that the 3 forbidden techniques can only be practiced by cultivators who have reached the level of Overgod. No one else can." Why? Tian frowned. He could not help but be stunned. Since they were forbidden techniques, they could not cultivate them at all. Why did they have to wait until they were Overgods? Overgods were extremely rare. There were hundreds of billions or even trillions of people in the entire God realm. There were tens of billions of cultivators, but there were definitely less than 100 Overgods. The palace masters of the 12 divine palaces were all Overgods, but their strength represented the apex of the God realm. This was more than enough to show just how difficult it was to become an Overgod. There were only a few thousand people in Little Rock Village, so it was not easy for them to produce an Overgod. The 3 great forbidden techniques of the Yun family are indeed terrifying. In the past, the Yun family relied on the 3 great forbidden techniques to become one of the peak clans, Yun Qing said sternly. As Yun Qing spoke, his expression became serious. However, the backlash from the 3 great forbidden techniques is also very strong. The earlier one cultivates them, the stronger the backlash. Only at the level of a main god can the backlash of a forbidden technique be completely suppressed. However, at that point, even if one cultivates the forbidden techniques, it won't be too powerful. It's precisely because all the cultivators of the Yun family cultivated the forbidden techniques that their lifespans were much shorter than cultivators of the same level. It was even less than 1/10 of a regular cultivator's lifespan. The dragon-inscribed talisman that Black Dragon secretly cultivated is the weakest of the 3 great forbidden techniques of the Yun family. The other 2 are even more terrifying, and the backlash is even more powerful. When the Black Cloud Dragon activated the Dragon Mark talisman, the backlash was already strong enough. At that time, even if he didn't die in your hands, I'm afraid he would have been tortured to death by the backlash. At this point, Yun Qing involuntarily shook his head and bitterly laughed. The 3 great forbidden techniques have already become a taboo within the Yun clan. If not for the appearance of Black Dragon Yun, I'm afraid that the members of the Yun clan would have already forgotten about the 3 great forbidden techniques. The power of the forbidden technique is so strong. Tian frowned and his eyes flickered. Misty. At this time, Yun Qing also thought of something and suddenly asked, "When you absorb the Black Cloud Dragon's dragon inscription talisman, do you feel anything strange now?" "No." Tian shook his head and said with a smile, "I feel that my strength has increased and my Yuan meridian has become much stronger. The dragon inscription talisman doesn't seem to have any backlash on me." "How strange." Yun Qing was stunned and looked at Tian in disbelief. In fact, he simply couldn't understand how Tian could directly absorb the dragon inscription talisman. This was too strange. "Elder Yun, you know about the 3 great forbidden techniques of the Yun clan, right?" Tian's gaze shifted as he suddenly asked. "This old man knows." Yun Qing nodded and said, "The 3 great forbidden techniques have always been kept by the village chief. However, the forbidden technique scrolls have been sealed and can't be opened." Tian frowned and immediately asked, "Where did Black Dragon Yun obtain the forbidden technique?" "It should be some ancient books." Yun Qing let out a long sigh. Suddenly, his face darkened as he looked at Tian with a burning gaze, as if he was thinking about something. Elder Yun, are you all right? Tian couldn't help but frown and ask in astonishment when he saw Yun Qing's strange expression. Yun Qing's eyes flickered and 3 scrolls suddenly appeared in his hand. He handed them over to Tian and said, Mr. Nya, these are the scrolls of the 3 great forbidden techniques of the Yun clan. This old man can no longer keep them. Please take care of them for me. If Little Stone Village is unfortunately destroyed, please destroy the 3 great forbidden techniques. Yin Qing's expression changed. In his heart, he had already prepared for the worst. Elder Yin, what are you? Tian was dazed for a moment. He used his divine sense to sense Yun Qing's body and actually felt a strange power flowing in the latter's body. Tian couldn't help but frown and couldn't help but carefully sense it. He actually felt that the strange power was nibbling away at Yun Qing's blood and qi. Elder Yun, what kind of power is in your body? Tian suddenly felt that something was wrong, and his brows suddenly furrowed. Yun Qing knew that Tian already knew, so his face turned red. He was actually a bit embarrassed to say it. Elder Yun, could it be that you also? Tian immediately understood. His expression suddenly changed, and he said in a low voice, You also practice the forbidden technique. Yun Qing was directly exposed by Tian, so he didn't hide it anymore. He solemnly nodded and said, When I was young, in order to compete for the village chief's position, I tried every possible way to improve my strength. Finally, in an ancient book, I found a record of the forbidden technique, the forbidden dragon's bloodline. In order to improve my strength, I practiced the forbidden dragon's bloodline. In the end, my strength improved, but there was a forbidden dragon's power in my bloodline, constantly nibbling away at my blood and qi. I know that I don't have much time left. I also feel ashamed for what I did in the past, but it's all too late. The forbidden dragon's power is too strong. I can't hold on for much longer. Yin Qing knew that he didn't have much time left. His eyes revealed not fear, but calmness. Tian lightly sighed. He wasn't a member of the Yun family, so he didn't have the right to criticize Yin Qing. Elder Yin, since you have the 3 forbidden technique scrolls in your hands, why don't you open them? Perhaps there's a way to suppress the forbidden dragon's power inside? Tian became cold and asked doubtfully. Hee. Yin Qing bitterly laughed and said, The forbidden technique scrolls are sealed by the ancestors of the Yun family. No one can open them. Tian was stunned. So it's like this. No wonder Yin Qing was so at ease to hand over the forbidden technique scrolls to me. Seal? Right at this time, Fat Cat's weird voice sounded in Tian's mind. It actually had a bit of ridicule in it, and it said with a mischievous tone, In this world, there is no seal that this deity can't open. Hearing Fat Cat's words, Tian's gaze couldn't help but tremble. He happily said, Fat, you can open the seal of the forbidden technique scrolls. Of course. Fat Cat laughed and said very arrogantly, As long as it isn't a seal left behind by a saint, this deity can open it. Tian was stunned. His eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. I didn't expect Fat Cat to be so powerful. Formations, seals, wards, there's almost nothing that Fat Cat couldn't do. This Fat Cat is really terrifying. Its only weakness is that it doesn't have any combat power, and it only has 2 tails. When Fat Cat grows out 9 tails, its combat power will probably become very shocking. Mr. Nya, I'll leave the forbidden technique scrolls to you, please. Yin Qing naturally didn't know about the conversation between Tian and Fat Cat. Instead, he looked at Tian with a sincere face and thanked him deeply. You're welcome. Tian smiled faintly and kept the forbidden technique scrolls. A strange smile hung on the corner of his mouth. 3 forbidden techniques, one more powerful than the other. Tian really wanted to see how powerful the other 2 forbidden techniques were. If possible, he wanted to cultivate the 3 forbidden techniques. Chapter 1571. Tian put away the forbidden technique scroll, and a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. He could feel that the dragon mark forbidden talisman had greatly improved him. His strength had become stronger, his 9 dragon veins had become stronger, and even his martial body had become stronger. More importantly, Tian could feel that the dragon mark talisman was still growing stronger. As long as he activated the talisman, his strength would increase temporarily. When Yun Heilung activated the dragon mark seal, his strength skyrocketed from the peak of the mid-god stage to the mid-stage of the high-god stage. Tian, of course, knew that this increase in strength was temporary, similar to the Yuan burst pill. Once the dragon mark seal returned to the Yuan meridian, his strength would return. However, the existence of the dragon mark seal was equivalent to Tian having the Yuan burst pill at any time. Mr. Nya, this old man will go check on the villagers first, Yun Qing said, and turned to leave. Tian nodded with a smile, then went to a secluded valley. He wanted to thoroughly check what changes the dragon mark seal and the tear of the princess had brought to his body. Phew! In the valley, Tian let out a long breath and began to look inside his body. The dragon mark seal turned into circles of runes and imprinted on the 9 dragon veins. It was a very strange scene. Tian carefully felt the dragon mark seal. In the next moment, he discovered something and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He said in astonishment, "The dragon mark seal is actually fusing with the dragon vein seal." At this moment, Tian suddenly felt that the dragon mark seal was actually slowly fusing with the dragon vein seal, as though it was breaking the seal bit by bit. This! Tian's mouth was wide open. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Tian, your dragon vein seal was formed by absorbing a huge amount of dragon qi, right? Fat Cat's figure suddenly appeared. She frowned and asked curiously. Yes, Tian nodded and asked, "Is there a problem?" His dragon vein seal was formed when he first entered the forbidden land of wind and cloud and absorbed the dragon qi of a golden dragon in the dragon coffin on the cliff wall. Later on, the dragon vein seal could be opened under certain circumstances. However, most of the time, the dragon vein seal was in a closed state and Tian could not use the dragon qi within the seal. No problem. The fat cat let out a strange laugh and said, "According to my observation, the dragon mark forbidden talisman is an extremely rare divine power. It can stimulate a martial artist's bloodline power and improve their martial body. The dragon inscription talisman and the dragon vein sealing sword seem to have some sort of fusion. When the dragon inscription talisman unseals the dragon vein seal, it is also slowly absorbing the power of the dragon vein seal." Impossible. When Tian heard this, he couldn't help but let out a strange cry. Tian knew very well how powerful the dragon vein seal was. When he broke free of his sealing mark, he was as strong as a peak paramount god. The forbidden dragon rune talisman was just some strange talisman. How could it absorb the power of the dragon vein seal? Why is it impossible? The fat cat laughed and said, "Don't underestimate the dragon rune talisman. Its power is very strange. Even I can't see through it." The Yun clan's ancestor lived in the early Archean era millions of years ago. Back then, there were many experts. The Yun clan's ancestor relied on the 3 great forbidden arts to make the Yun clan a super family in the early Archean era. However, everything in this world has its pros and cons. The extremely powerful forbidden arts must have a huge side effect. The Yun clan's ancestor must have realized something when he cultivated the 3 great forbidden arts. That's why he led the Yun clan's people to live in seclusion and forbade them from cultivating the forbidden arts. Tian frowned and couldn't help but wonder, since the 3 great forbidden arts have such a strong backlash, why don't I feel anything after absorbing the dragon rune talisman? Tian, you're in luck. The fat cat chuckled and said, "I've already checked your body. The backlash from a dragon rune talisman doesn't exist. I'm guessing that Cher's tear must have fused with your blood and caused a strange change in your martial body, allowing you to completely ignore the backlash from the dragon rune talisman." It really is Cher's tear. Tian's eyes slightly trembled and he immediately asked, "Fat, do you know what that tear is?" The fat cat's huge eyes slightly froze. It hesitated for a moment, but it still said 4 words, "The princess's tear." "The princess's tear?" Tian was stunned. He didn't know what the princess's tear represented. Tian, I know very little about the princess's tear. If you want to know what it is, you can only rely on yourself. The fat cat smiled and said, however, the princess's tear is very powerful and won't have any side effects on you. Perhaps the evil energy in your blood will also change because of the princess's tear. Tian frowned and remained silent for a while. The princess's tear was indeed an extraordinary thing. It was really terrifying. Tian, the princess's tear is one of the 3 great legends of the ancient Ming tribe. The fat cat looked at Tian and sighed in its heart. Rumor has it that the person who activates the princess's tear will change the fate of the ancient Ming tribe. Will you be the man of destiny? Tian didn't know what the fat cat was thinking. After a moment of silence, he suddenly asked, Fat, what will happen when the dragon rune talisman absorbs the power of the dragon vein seal? With the power of the dragon mark forbidden talisman, the final result is very likely that the dragon mark forbidden talisman will completely absorb the dragon vein seal, and its power will reach its peak. Little Fat Cat chuckled and said proudly, if that's the case, then the dragon rune talisman is even more powerful than the dragon vein seal. Tian was stunned. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. The dragon rune talisman's power far exceeded his expectations. Yes, the fat cat nodded and said, if the dragon rune talisman reaches its peak and is activated, even if you are in the paramount god realm, your battle prowess will increase by leaps and bounds with the help of the talisman. As long as you can reach the peak of the paramount god realm and activate the dragon rune talisman, you will be able to fight 9 God Calamity, who is in the half-step saint realm. That's terrifying. Tian's eyes trembled and he gulped. The fat cat had said before that even an expert like Niet Dao couldn't withstand the pressure of a half-step saint calamity. The dragon rune talisman was so powerful. Tian, you can't overuse the dragon rune talisman. The fat cat reminded Tian at this time. Every time you use the dragon rune talisman, the talisman itself will enter a period of weakness. This will greatly slow down the dragon rune talisman's absorption of the dragon vein seal, and it will also harm your martial body. Yes, Tian nodded. He wouldn't use the dragon rune talisman unless he was in a critical situation. Fat, let's take a look at these 3 forbidden technique scrolls. Tian suddenly became excited. He took out 3 forbidden technique scrolls and placed them in front of the fat cat. Chapter 1572. Fat, take a look. Is it possible to break the seal on the scroll? Tian placed the scroll in front of the fat cat and said excitedly. The fat cat nodded. It moved its body and released a gust of colored glazed qi. The colored glazed qi started to examine the scroll. The fat cat seemed to have sensed something and fell in a deep thought. Fat, how is it? Tian frowned when he saw the fat cat's reaction. He looked worried. The fat cat had boasted a lot before, but its reaction wasn't very good. The seal on the scroll is very strong. Even after millions of years, the seal hasn't weakened at all. The fat cat calmed down and laughed. However, this seal isn't a problem for me. I just need some time to break it. How long? Tian was stunned. His eyes lit up. If breaking the seal required tens or hundreds of years, then it would be meaningless. A month at the slowest, half a month at the fastest. The fat cat nodded slightly and smiled. That's good. Tian let out a long sigh. He could afford to wait for half a month. Someone's coming. I'll leave first. At this time, little fat cat let out a weird laugh, and with a flash, it disappeared with the 3 forbidden scrolls. Tian was stunned for a moment. Then, he immediately realized that the forbidden magic scroll was actually a living thing. Mr. Nya. Right after the fat cat disappeared, Yunqing's voice came from outside the valley. Elder Yun. Seeing Yunqing walk over, Tian smiled and asked, is there anything I can help you with? Yunqing bowed slightly and said respectfully, Mr. Nya, several of your friends are seriously injured. I'd like to help them recover. How? Tian was stunned. He immediately thought of something and said, 9 leaves Bodhi. Yunqing knew that Tian had seen the 9-leaf Bodhi fruit before, so he wasn't surprised. He said, The nine-leaf Bodhi fruit grows from absorbing the Mother Earth essence energy from the nine dragon earth veins. The nine-leaf Bodhi fruit contains powerful Mother Earth essence energy. As long as your friend consumes the nine-leaf Bodhi fruit, he will be able to recover very quickly. His strength might even increase. Thank you, Elder Yun. Tian nodded heavily, his eyes blazing. Chen Wuqing and the rest were severely injured. If they were to only take divine pills, they would need at least half a month to fully recover. However, with the nine-leaf Bodhi fruit, he would be able to recover quickly. Tian and Yun Qing didn't waste any time. They went straight to the entrance of the earth vein. The nine-leaf Bodhi tree. Arriving at the entrance of the abyss once more, Tian gazed at the massive tree floating in front of him. Sensing the immense power emanating from it, he was deeply moved. The nine-leaf Bodhi had only absorbed the energy from the nine dragons' earth vein, yet it was already so powerful. It was hard to imagine what kind of terrifying energy the nine dragons' earth vein contained. Mr. Nya, please wait a moment. Yin Qing faintly smiled. With a flicker of his silhouette, he flew towards the nine-leaf Bodhi tree. After plucking several nine-leaf Bodhi fruits, he returned. Tian, who was watching from the side, was stunned. He didn't expect it to be so easy. If he had known earlier, he would have plucked a few nine-leaf Bodhi fruits before coming here. Subsequently, Tian and Yun Qing returned to where the others were. Chen Wuqing, Yang Zhongxiu, Niet Xiu, Ed, and the rest each consumed a nine-leaf Bodhi fruit. Their strengths quickly recovered. Tian also consumed a nine-leaf Bodhi fruit. He could feel the blood and qi in his body surging. His strength had increased slightly. He seemed to be showing signs of breaking through again. Tian had only advanced to early stage mid-god a few days ago. However, after absorbing the energy from the Dragon Mark talisman, fusing with the tear of the princess, and consuming the nine-leaf Bodhi fruit, his strength had reached the peak of early stage mid-god. He was showing signs of breaking through again. After Chen Wuqing consumed the nine-leaf Bodhi fruit, he really did break through. His strength reached the mid-stage mid-god level. Niechio's strength also rose to the peak of low-stage mid-god level. Ed and Yang Zhongxiu, on the other hand, still maintained their original strength. The nine-leaf Bodhi fruit contained powerful Mother Earth Yuan energy. It was a kind of extremely pure life force. Everyone's injuries were instantly healed. The next day, everything was very peaceful. The people of Green Wolf Bastion did not appear. However, everyone was very agitated. At this moment, they were like a group of piglets waiting for the people of Green Wolf Bastion to come. Yin Qing settled the villagers of Little Rock Village in a remote valley, far away from the entrance of the earth vein. Tian didn't know when the people of Green Wolf Bastion would arrive. He had the idea of probing the entrance of the earth vein. He went to find Yin Qing and told her about his thoughts. Mr. Nya, are you really going to enter the Nine Dragons' earth vein? Yin Qing frowned. He knew that the reason Tian came to Little Rock Village was for the Nine Dragons' earth vein. As the guardian family of the Nine Dragons' earth vein, Yun family really didn't want to see this happen. But the Yun family could barely protect themselves now, let alone the Nine Dragons' earth vein. If the Nine Dragons' earth vein was exposed, Yin Qing hoped that Tian would enter it. It was better than being snatched away by the people of Green Wolf Bastion. Yes, Tian nodded slightly. I'm going to check the earth vein first. Maybe there's a better hiding place down there. The villagers of Little Rock Village can hide there. All right, Yin Qing nodded. He knew that he couldn't stop Tian, so he could only agree. After a while, Tian and the rest arrived at the entrance of the earth vein. It was the first time Chen Wuqing and the rest had seen such a magical scene. Their eyes couldn't help but tremble. Their expressions became dull. This is the entrance of the Nine Dragons' earth vein. Tian smiled faintly. He looked at the bottom of the abyss. It was a bottomless darkness. Who knew what was hidden there? Tian, are we going to enter the earth vein? Chen Wuqing looked at Tian, unable to conceal the passion in his eyes. Chen Wuqing, let's go in and check it out first. Tian nodded slightly. He and Chen Wuqing were the strongest, so they would go in first. I want to go too. At this moment, Yun Tian stepped forward and said stubbornly, Yun Tian, don't mess around. Yun Qing glared at Yun Tian. Entering the earth vein was no joke. One careless move, and they would lose their lives. I'm not messing around. Unexpectedly, Yun Tian was very determined this time. He had to enter the earth vein. Elder Yun, let Yun Tian come with me. Nie Tian smiled. Bringing Yun Tian along was not a bad idea. After all, the latter was a martial artist who absorbed Mother Earth essence energy all year round. Yin Qing looked at Nie Tian and nodded deeply. Nie Tian naturally understood what Yin Qing meant. He nodded with a smile. He would protect Yin Tian well. Immediately, Nie Tian hesitated no more. He took a step forward and entered the sky above the abyss. The instant he entered the sky above the abyss, Nie Tian felt the vast Mother Earth essence energy surging over. All the pores on his body opened up. He was like dry ground, absorbing the Mother Earth essence energy crazily. Chapter 1573. Nie Tian stood above the abyss and enjoyed the nourishment of the Mother Earth essence energy. However, after a moment, he felt his body being filled with the Mother Earth essence energy and stopped absorbing it. Every martial artist's martial body had a limit to what it could take. It was already very abnormal for Nie Tian to be able to absorb so much Mother Earth essence energy. At this moment, Chen Wuqing and Yun Tian also appeared. The three of them looked at each other, and without hesitation, they immediately went down the abyss. Everyone looked at the three gradually disappearing figures and couldn't help showing worry on their faces. Nie Qiu, Ed, and the rest were worried about Nie Tian's safety, while Yun Qing was worried that the people from Green Wolf Stronghold would appear at any time. In the abyss, Nie Tian and the other two were sinking rapidly. Nie Tian felt that the deeper they went, the denser the aura of the Mother Earth essence energy. That surging aura made one's blood boil. The nine-leaf Bodhi was constantly being nourished by the Mother Earth essence energy, so it wasn't strange for it to grow to 5,000 to 6,000 meters. Because Yun Tian had been absorbing the Mother Earth essence energy, he was even more familiar with it. After a moment, Nie Tian felt that he had already sunk thousands of meters, but he didn't touch the bottom of the abyss. He couldn't help but panic. This abyss is actually so deep. Chen Wuqing couldn't help but exclaim in shock. His voice reverberated in the abyss, making it seem spacious and strange. The Nine Dragons' earth veins are hidden 10,000 meters deep underground. We have only sunk halfway. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out. She chuckled and looked like she didn't care at all. As Nie Tian sank, he sensed everything around him. This was the dark abyss. It was pitch black, and he couldn't even see his fingers in front of him. However, he had the starry sky eyes and the holographic divine prince. He could see everything around him very clearly. Nie Tian looked at the cliff of the abyss and realized that the rocks here were already very similar to the Mother Earth essence stones. They contained a large amount of Mother Earth essence energy. As he continued to sink, Nie Tian felt the pressure in the space gradually increase. It was constantly pressing on his body and made him feel like he couldn't breathe. The pressure that came from the depths of the abyss was like the astral winds of the nine heavens, making people feel extremely pressured. The deeper they went, the heavier the pressure became. Among Nie Tian's trio, Yun Tian was the weakest. At this moment, he was already panting heavily. Nie Tian could sense that Yun Tian couldn't hold on for much longer. He couldn't help but frown as he released a surge of energy to envelop Yun Tian, alleviating the pressure on him. What's that? At this moment, Chen Wuqing seemed to have discovered something and suddenly screamed. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and looked around. He didn't find anything unusual. Nie Tian, I just saw a flash of fire. Chen Wuqing was still in shock, and his voice was trembling. Nie Tian's expression darkened. He activated the holographic divine rune and sensed carefully, but he still couldn't sense anything. He could only say, maybe your eyes are playing tricks on you. Chen Wuqing wasn't weak, so he shouldn't be seeing things. However, this place was nearly 10,000 meters deep. The pressure was huge, so it was normal for his spiritual sense to be distracted for a moment. There's really a fire. However, at this moment, Yin Tian also screamed, appearing extremely panicked. Nye Tian was startled. He stabilized his body, and his expression couldn't help but turn even more solemn. Chen Wuqing and Yun Tian both discovered the abnormality. This wasn't something that could be explained by hallucinations. Nye Tian, be careful. Just when Nye Tian became cautious, Fat Cat's scream suddenly rang out. Nye Tian was startled. He immediately sensed an extremely sharp energy rushing towards him. Just when the energy was about to reach him, it suddenly emitted a ball of fire, revealing its true face. This was an extremely ugly face. 70% of it looked like a bat, and 30% of it looked like a human. The black bone wings were fully spread out and were approximately 3 to 4 meters long. Its entire body was pitch black, blending into the darkness. Only the center of its forehead was flickering with a strange light. Boom! Nye Tian's reaction was extremely fast. He stabbed out with his sword, and a sword shadow whizzed out, blasting towards the monster. Pong! With a muffled sound, the monster was repelled and let out 2 mournful screams. Then it actually blended into the darkness again, disappearing completely. What is that thing? Chen Wuqing and Yun Tian were both frightened. Their eyes were trembling as they cried out in shock. I also don't know. Nye Tian shook his head slightly. He was also a little nervous as he leaned back to back with Chen Wuqing and Yun Tian. That monster just now was very terrifying. It actually didn't die after taking his sword head on. It didn't even seem to be injured. Nye Tian, this is the Darkwing Firebat. At this time, Fat Cat's voice rang out. There was actually some panic in it. Darkwing Firebat. Without waiting for Nye Tian to feel strange, Disher Tian's voice rang out and said in surprise, Boss, the Darkwing Firebat is an ancient species. Isn't it already extinct? The Darkwing Firebat in the outside world is indeed extinct. However, the Nine Dragons Earth vein is isolated from the outside world. It's not strange for the Darkwing Firebat to appear. Fat Cat said solemnly and directly said to Nye Tian, Quickly leave this place. Leave? Nye Tian was stunned for a moment. He had already come here and was about to reach the bottom of the abyss and enter the real Nine Dragons Earth vein. Wouldn't it be a pity to leave at this time? The Darkwing Firebat is not a joke. It is an ancient species. It is violent and bloodthirsty. Moreover, it lives in groups. You can deal with one Darkwing Firebat, but if there are thousands of them, how are you going to deal with them? Fat Cat said anxiously and urged Nye Tian to leave immediately. All right. Although Nye Tian was unwilling, he still decided to leave. Even the Fat Cat was afraid of the Darkwing Firebat. It must not be taken lightly. Let's go. Nye Tian roared. His figure moved and flew towards the sky. Squeak, squeak, squeak. However, at this time, there was an ear-piercing sound in the sky. It was as if there were countless pairs of wings flapping. Oh no! Nye Tian suddenly raised his head, and his heart suddenly sank. Boom! In the next moment, endless rays of light appeared above them, instantly forming a sea of fire. Above Nye Tian's group of 3, countless Darkwing Firebats appeared, crowding together like a dense dark cloud. This! Chen Wuqing and Yun Tian saw this scene, and their faces stiffened. Their eyes were filled with unconcealable fear. Rush out! Nye Tian's eyes flashed as he roared in a low voice. After which, he activated the extreme wind firmament battle armor, enveloping the 3 of them. His astral soul wings appeared on his back, and with a flap of his wings, he slashed out with Heaven Slash, soaring towards the sky. Rumble! The gigantic sword shadow was like a flood dragon, bombarding the Darkwing Firebats. Ear-piercing sounds rang out as the Firebats screeched in agony. The terrifying sound waves reverberated in the air, affecting the minds of cultivators. Crack, crack, crack. In the next moment, Nye Tian's sword shadow actually shattered under the attack of the Darkwing Firebats. Immediately, the endless flames pressed down, enveloping the 3 of them. Chapter 1574. Boom! The instant the firmament wind battle armor shattered, A powerful, blazing flame rushed over, intending to engulf Nietian and the rest. The flame within the body of the Darkwing Firebat was the Firebat Flame. Its burning ability was extremely strong, comparable to the Devil Flames on the Devil Fire ranking. Astral Soul Armor. At this critical moment, Nietian's body trembled. Boundless astral energy gushed out, condensing into an astral soul armor that enveloped the three of them. Chi. The Firebat Flame bombarded the astral soul armor, causing ear-piercing sounds to ring out. Chen Wuqing, we have to rush out. Nietian let out a low roar. Although the Star Soul armor could temporarily resist the Firebat's flames, it would consume a large amount of his star power. Under such circumstances, Nietian wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Chen Wuqing nodded his head heavily. Raising his head, he thrust his dark dust spear towards the sky. The spear's shadow was like a flood dragon emerging from the abyss, exploding forth with a powerful attack, forcibly scattering the Darkwing Firebats. Good chance. Seeing this, Nietian exclaimed in joy. Flapping his astral soul wings, he soared toward the sky. However, the power of Chen Wuqing's spear was limited. In the next instant, countless Darkwing Firebats gathered over. Their black, bony wings could be seen clearly, and their malevolent faces were filled with extreme coldness. Boom! The Darkwing Firebats gathered together and charged downwards, condensing into a giant flame that resembled a sharp sword, rushing towards Nietian and the rest. Be careful! Nietian screamed. His silhouette flickered, flashing a distance of a few hundred meters, barely dodging the fatal attack of the flame. However, he was still injured by the blazing flames. Half of his arm was instantly char-black. Nietian, are you all right? Chen Wuqing saw that Nietian was injured and couldn't help but cry out in alarm. I'm fine. Nietian furrowed his brows as his countenance sank. He forcefully circulated the 9 revolutions, Yuan meridians, and the wound on his arm slowly healed. The damage caused by the Firebat's flames was extremely terrifying. Even someone as powerful as Nietian couldn't recover from his wounds instantly. Nietian endured the pain and looked up at the sky with a worried expression. The Darkwing Firebats in the sky numbered in the tens of thousands. With Nietian's group strength, it was impossible for them to charge out. Are they trying to force me into the earth vein? Nietian steadied himself and looked down, thinking of entering the earth vein. However, he didn't dare to make a rash decision because he didn't know what kind of dangers were hidden in the 9 Dragons earth vein. Even before entering the earth vein, something like the Darkwing Firebat had already appeared. It wouldn't be strange if some other ancient species appeared below. Big Brother Nietian, follow me. I'll bring you guys out of here. Yun Tian suddenly spoke, his eyes flashing with extreme determination. Nietian looked at Yun Tian and was taken aback. Even he and Chen Wuqing couldn't resist the Darkwing Firebat. How could Yun Tian, an early-stage low god, escape? Big Brother Nietian, Big Brother Chen Wuqing. At this moment, Yun Tian's attitude towards Nietian and Chen Wuqing was very friendly, even respectful. He spread out his palm, and a white whirlpool gushed out from the center of his palm. The whirlpool spun rapidly and contained extremely terrifying energy. What's this? Nietian and Chen Wuqing were stunned and exclaimed. This is the ancestral treasure of our Yun family, the divine war-clued garment. As Yun Tian spoke, the white whirlpool in his palm slowly emitted 5 colored halos. The halos were extremely dazzling and gave off an extremely sacred aura. Grandpa told me that the divine war-clued garment must not be used carelessly and must not be revealed to outsiders. Otherwise, I will be killed. Yun Tian furrowed his brows and looked at Nietian and Chen Wuqing. He smiled and said, Big Brother Nietian and Big Brother Chen Wuqing are the benefactors of Little Rock Village. They shouldn't be outsiders, right? Nietian and Chen Wuqing looked at each other and smiled. They didn't expect that the seemingly reckless Yun Tian would be so scheming. After hearing what he said, Nietian and Shan Wuqing naturally wouldn't have any improper thoughts about the Divine Warclude Garment. The Divine Warclude Garment should be a rank 9 divine weapon. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded. It said with a mischievous smile, "This garment is indeed not bad. It actually contains extremely terrifying bloodline power. It can basically be considered as half a divine weapon." Half a divine weapon? Nie Tian was stunned and immediately asked, "How is the Divine Warclude Garment compared to the Demonic Glaze Pagoda?" The Demonic Glaze Pagoda is a true divine weapon. The Divine Warclude Garment is only a modified rank 9 divine weapon. Of course it can't be compared. Fat Cat laughed strangely with a face full of disdain. The Demonic Glaze Pagoda was a true divine weapon. Hua Jiuxian hadn't truly obtained the power of the Demonic Glaze Pagoda. She only cultivated the incomplete 9 Revolution Glaze art and had already reached the peak of the 9 realms. The terror of the Demonic Glaze Pagoda was evident. Fat, the Divine Warclude Garment can block the attack of the Darkwing Firebat, right? Nie Tian was a little worried and couldn't help but ask. The Divine Warclude Garment is a rank 9 divine weapon. It's enough. Fat Cat smiled and said, "Letting this kid follow us is indeed a wise move." Nie Tian smiled faintly. He also didn't expect Yin Tian to have such a terrifying item. "Big brother Nie Tian, big brother Chen Wuqing, let's go." Yin Tian raised his palm, and the Divine Warclude Garment unfolded. It was like a 5-colored cloud that enveloped Nie Tian and the others. The three glanced at each other, then charged into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the light was blinding. The 5-colored radiance of the Divine Warclude Garment extended for 1,000 meters. It was like a divine hand had parted the clouds and dispersed the mist. Wherever the light passed, the Darkwing Firebats all avoided it, not daring to approach. What a terrifying power! Nie Tian's face sank when he saw this. The power of the Divine Warclude Garment had exceeded his expectations. The Darkwing Firebats were ancient beasts after all, yet they didn't dare to approach the colorful radiance. "That's nothing." Fat Cat was disdainful. "Yin Tian is too weak. He hasn't unleashed the true power of the Divine Warclude Garment at all. The Divine Warclude Garment contains extremely terrifying bloodline power. That's the power left behind by the ancestors of the Yun family. Yin Tian is a descendant of the Yun family. His blood can unleash the terrifying power of the Divine Warclude Garment. Once he becomes an overgod and his bloodline power is strong enough, the Divine Warclude Garment will be able to unleash its true power." Nie Tian was stunned. The ancestor of the Yun family was definitely an expert who had reached the very pinnacle to be able to fuse the bloodline power into the Divine Warclude Garment. This kid's future is limitless. Nie Tian couldn't help but glance at Yin Tian. He smiled and thought to himself. He was very curious. If Yin Tian and ED both matured, who would be stronger? ED's potential was also very terrifying. After all, he possessed the Demon Dragon's heart. Under the protection of the Divine Warclude Garment, Nie Tian and the other two charged out of the Darkwing Firebat flock in the blink of an eye. Seeing that they were far enough away from the Darkwing Firebats, Yin Tian hurriedly stowed the Divine Warclude Garment away. "Let's go back first." Nie Tian lowered his head and glanced below. Their exploration of the ley line of the 9 dragons had failed. They could only go back and think of another way. The three did not waste any time and charged into the sky. As soon as they arrived at the entrance of the ley line, they heard chaotic battle cries. Chapter 1575. When Nie Tian and the other two heard the battle cries, their expressions changed. They immediately jumped out of the abyss and rushed away. 3 figures flashed past and dashed out. Soon they arrived outside. "It's the Green Wolf Bastion." Nie Tian jumped out and stood on a huge rock. He saw several black-clothed warriors fighting with Yin Qing and the others. "Die, you old thing." Right at this moment, one of the black-robed cultivators roared in anger as he struck out with his palm. The violent force of his palm blasted out towards Yun Qingquan. The black-clothed warrior was not weak. He was at the peak of the intermediate celestial realm. Yun Qing was injured and was at an absolute disadvantage. If this palm landed, he would definitely die. Grandfather. Seeing this, Yun Tian let out a furious roar and charged forward like a wild beast. Boom! But before Yun Tian's figure arrived, a mighty sword shadow had already struck down. The black-clothed warrior could not withstand the attack and died on the spot. Old Yun, are you all right? Nie Tian's figure flashed and came to Yun Qing's side. I'm fine. Yun Qing saw that Nie Tian and the others had returned, and his old face showed a faint gratification. But at this moment, his complexion was very bad. He looked incomparably old and did not have the vigor for before. It was obvious that he had reached the limit of his life. Nie Tian already knew that Yun Qing had been suffering from the backlash of the forbidden technique. He was already like a candle in the wind and did not have much time left. In addition, the battle with the black-clothed warrior had pushed his lifespan to the limit. Yun Tian, stay and protect old Yun. I'll go and deal with the others. Nie Tian said and flew into the distance. Yun Qing's lifespan was about to end, and he probably had something to say to Yun Tian. Nie Tian, let Yun Tian stay. On the other side, Yang Zhongqiu and Nie Qiu were fighting with all their might. Fortunately, the villagers of Little Rock Village had been settled in a valley far away. Otherwise, they would have been slaughtered by the Green Wolf Bastion. At that moment, there were not many bandits in the forbidden area. There were only a dozen or so of them, and they were not very strong. Yang Zhongqiu and the others were not injured. Nie Tian saw that Yi Di was fighting with a warrior at the peak of the lower deity stage and was already at a disadvantage. He was worried that Yi Di would be injured. With a flash, he swung his sword and took the life of the black-robed man. Big brother Nie Tian, you're back. Seeing Nie Tian appear, Yi Di couldn't help but shout in pleasant surprise. Yi Di, retreat to the back. Nie Tian nodded slightly and gestured for Yi Di to retreat. At this moment, several bandits noticed Nie Tian and charged over. Courting death, Nie Tianling laughed and slashed out with his sword without hesitation. Instantly, several sword shadows appeared at the same time. The bandits didn't even have time to scream before they died. What a terrifying person! When the other bandits saw Nie Tian's bravery, their eyes couldn't help but tremble. Their bodies became sluggish, and they didn't dare to rush forward. Nie Tian scanned the area. Seeing that there were no experts, he turned to Chen Wuqing and shouted, Chen Wuqing, I'll leave this place to you. I'll go to the entrance. He knew that these bandits were only the vanguard. The truly terrifying enemies were still outside and hadn't come in. With a flap of his wings, Nie Tian arrived at the entrance of the forbidden area in a flash. As expected, Nie Tian looked around and saw that there were hundreds of bandits outside the forbidden area. They were carefully passing through the killing formation one by one. Yun Xian was also among the bandits. Obviously, he was the one who led the bandits into the village and told them the route to the forbidden area. It's that kid. At this moment, Yun Xian also noticed Nie Tian and cried out. His eyes released a strong, killing intent. He saw with his own eyes that Nie Tian killed his son. How could he not be angry at this vengeance? At this moment, there were two figures standing beside Yun Xian. One was tall, and the other was short. Both were middle-aged men, and their auras were very strong. They were even stronger than Zhao Yongji from before. Nie Tian's divine senses swept over. Because of the existence of the killing formation, he couldn't sense the true strength of the two men. However, he could tell that these two were the big leader and second leader of Green Wolf Bastion. They're all here. It looks like the Green Wolf stronghold has turned out in full force this time. Nie Tian's eyes were dark, and a hint of coldness could be seen in them. At this time, Nie Tian's figure flickered, and he appeared outside of the forbidden area's killing spell formation. Without the slightest hesitation, he slashed out with his sword. The bandit didn't even have time to react before he died a miserable death. Nie Tianling laughed and said loudly, This killing formation is the gate of death for all of you. I'll kill anyone who enters. His cold and stern voice resounded in the air, full of murderous intent. The killing formation was very good. Even if the people of Green Wolf Bastion knew the way in, they could only enter one by one. This undoubtedly gave Nye Tian a very good opportunity to kill them. He only needed to guard the place and kill anyone who entered. When the other bandits saw Nye Tian's imposing manner, they couldn't help but be stunned and didn't dare to move forward. Yun Xian, who is that silver-haired boy? Outside the forbidden area, the burly man stared at Nye Tian. His eyes were like a wolf's as he spoke coldly. He was none other than Wang Lang, the big leader of Green Wolf Bastion, a warrior at the peak of High God Stage. The short warrior beside Wang Lang was the second leader of Green Wolf Bastion, Gao Fei. When Wang Lang and Gao Fei heard the news of Zhao Yongji's tragic death in Little Rock Village, they were furious. This time, they came out in full force not only to obtain the nine-leaf Bodhi, but also to avenge Zhao Yongji. Although Wang Lang, Gao Fei, and Zhao Yongji weren't brothers, they were companions who fought together and had a deep bond with each other. Big leader, this kid is the murderer of the third leader. My son, Black Dragon Yun, was also killed by him. Yun Xian stared at Nye Tian with venomous eyes. He wished he could skin the latter alive. Wang Lang's eyes slightly sank. He couldn't conceal the surprise in his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "This guy only has the strength of an early-stage mid-god. Third brother is a high god expert. How could he have died by his hands?" Yun Xian was stunned for a moment before he hastily said, "Big leader, this kid's strength is very strange. There's a dragon vein in his body, and he can release strange, evil energy. It's very frightening." Dragon vein? Wang Lang and Gao Fei simultaneously cried out in surprise when they heard the name. Their eyes were filled with burning desire. I want to see what kind of dragon vein it is that allowed him to kill a high god expert. In the next moment, Wang Lang's eyes darkened. Immediately after, he moved and stepped into the killing formation of the forbidden area. Charge forward. Wang Lang, who was blocked by several bandits, couldn't help but roar in a deep voice, forcing the people in front of him to move forward. These bandits only had the strength of early-stage mid-gods. Forcing them to move forward was tantamount to suicide. However, the bandits were obviously very afraid of Wang Lang. They could only brace themselves and move forward. Nye Tian's figure stood in midair. Every time someone walked out of the killing formation, he would strike with his sword and kill that person. After a short while, only one figure remained in the killing formation, and that was Wang Lang. Chapter 1576. Wang Lang stepped out from the void. The moment the giant cyan wolf appeared behind him, a surging oppressive aura was released and pressed down on Nye Tian. "Stinking brat, I'd like to see exactly how capable you are." Wang Lang's voice rumbled like thunder. His violent aura slammed down mercilessly like a raging wave. He was an expert at the peak of High God Stage. When he fully released his aura, even a warrior at the peak of Mid-God Stage would be oppressed to death. Nye Tian was only an early-stage mid-god. He was sure that Nye Tian wouldn't be able to withstand such a powerful aura. "You want to test my strength? You're not qualified." With a cold smile, Nye Tian took a step forward. Instead of dodging, he met the attack head-on. A sword aura arose from the ground, and a mighty sword light shot out to a distance of 10,000 meters, like a sharp sword that could split heaven and earth. Bang! In the void, the two auras collided with each other, producing a muffled sound. Wang Lang's aura was forcibly broken, and even he was forced to take several steps back. The crowd outside the forbidden area gasped when they saw this scene. They didn't expect Nye Tian's strength to be so strange. Not only did he break Wang Lang's aura, but he also forced Wang Lang to take a few steps back. It was really terrifying. "Brat, you have some strength." Wang Lang was surprised. But he was the chief of a stronghold, after all. He calmed down and stared at Nye Tian with murderous eyes. At this moment, he was extremely afraid of Nye Tian and regarded Nye Tian as a real opponent. He finally understood that Nye Tian could kill Zhao Yongji by relying on his powerful strength. "This brat only has the strength of a mid-god, but he can resist my aura. If his strength improves a little, I'm afraid that he can fight me head-on. I have to kill him now." Wang Lang's face was extremely gloomy. The murderous intent in his heart was getting stronger. "Chief, This brat is a little strange. Be careful. Outside the forbidden area, Gao Fei, the second-in-command of Green Wolf Stronghold, seemed to have noticed something and warned Wang Lang. Got it, Wang Lang replied in a deep voice. Then he fixed his eyes on Ye Tian and said coldly, Boy, you do have some tricks up your sleeve. It's a pity that I'm the one you've met today. So, there's only one ending for you, death. As the word die fell, killing intent blossomed. It was as if the killing intent had materialized and shrouded everyone, causing them to feel suffocated. Oof. And yet Tian was shrouded in murderous intent, but he sneered and said, You want to kill me? Unfortunately, you're not qualified. Courting death. Sensing the contempt in Ye Tian's eyes, Wang Lang couldn't help but fly into a rage. With a flash, the cyan wolf behind him pounced forward ferociously like a mountain, crazily pressing down on Wang Lang. Astral soul armor. Upon seeing this, Ye Tian didn't dare to be careless. With a low roar, astral energy gushed forth from his body as an astral soul armor appeared, enveloping him like a towering giant. Rumble! In the next instant, the giant cyan wolf slammed down, directly smashing into the astral soul armor. A deafening boom rang out as waves of chi surged up to the skies, causing the entire space to tremble. Kaboom! Ye Tian felt an immense pressure pressing down on him, causing the ground beneath his feet to tremble violently, after which cracks appeared on the ground, as though it was on the verge of collapse. His silhouette was actually pressed down by a few inches. Under the immense pressure, Ye Tian felt as though his body was about to be torn apart. His entire body was in excruciating pain. Smelly brat, let's see how long you can last. Wang Lang laughed coldly when he saw that Ye Tian was being suppressed, after which he released an even more powerful aura, pressing down on Ye Tian once again. You want to kill me? Impossible. Ye Tian felt an even more terrifying pressure pressing down on him. His countenance turned malevolent, but his eyes were filled with killing intent. With a low roar, he stabbed out with his sword. Waves of sword shadows fused with the power of the chaotic flames gushed forth. Kaboom! Like a dragon, the sword shadows surged out and bombarded on the giant cyan wolf. After a loud bang, a terrifying crack appeared on the cyan wolf's body, and it immediately crumbled. Wang Lang's body trembled, and he couldn't help but take several steps back. His eyes were filled with deep shock. It was hard to imagine that a dignified peak high god like him would be forced back twice by an early-stage mid-god. What a humiliation! After repelling Wang Lang, Ye Tian took a step forward and leaped into the air. The power of his astral soul spread out behind him. Dazzling starlight filled the sky. It was exceptionally dazzling. Is this all you've got? Just SOSO. Ye Tian stared at Wang Lang with fiery eyes and spoke in a cold tone. He seemed to be extremely provocative. At this moment, the spectators outside the forbidden area were all dumbfounded. They couldn't understand what was happening. A peak high god and an early stage mid god. The difference between the two was almost 2 whole realms. Yet they were equally matched. Son of a bitch, you're courting death. A cold, mocking voice fell in Wang Lang's ears. It was as if a steel needle had pierced into his heart, causing him to fall into a state of rage. He let out a deep roar and released an incomparably violent cyan energy from his body. The billowing energy tumbled unceasingly. The sky seemed to have become turbulent and started to tremble. The leader is angry. The bandits couldn't help but tremble, and their faces were filled with terror. Ye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He could feel that Wang Lang's aura was rising steadily. It was as if he was releasing an extremely terrifying energy from his body. Brat, you deserve to die for forcing me to use my bloodline energy. Wang Lang laughed coldly, and the cyan energy around him became even more terrifying. Even the space around him was pulled taut. Astral Sky Restriction, activate. Ye Tian frowned and activated the Astral Sky Restriction without hesitation. Wang Lang's bloodline energy was somewhat strange. It seemed to be constantly burning his blood and chi, Its power was extremely terrifying. The astral sky restriction was activated invisibly, enveloping the space within a radius of tens of thousands of meters. In this space, Nietion's strength would increase qualitatively, while Wang Lang's strength would be suppressed. Boundary. Outside the forbidden area, Gao Fei seemed to have sensed something. His eyes darkened, and he couldn't help but exclaim. He suddenly sensed that a huge boundary had appeared in the void. This boundary was very strange. Although it didn't seem strong, it contained extremely terrifying power. Gao Fei's perception was very strong. He had seen many boundaries before, but this one in front of him was the strangest one he had ever seen. Son of a bitch, die for me. Gao Fei wanted to warn Wang Lang, but the latter couldn't wait any longer. With a roar, he directly attacked. Wang Lang's figure descended. The cyan bloodline energy condensed into a wolf's claw that was thousands of meters long. Under the cold light, several cyan blades appeared, as if they were going to tear everything apart. Nietion's eyes darkened slightly, and then he fully activated the astral soul divine armor. He suddenly struck out with his sword. The dual mysteries of heaven and earth merged together, and a giant black snake appeared. Its body was surging with scorching flames. It was the astral soul flame. In the astral sky restriction, the power that increased the most was the power of the stars. Chapter 1577. In the forbidden area, the sky and earth were shaking and the weather was changing. The ultimate battle between Wang Lang and Nietion was about to take place. Everyone's eyes were burning with excitement. Their hearts were in their throats, and they didn't want to miss out on any exciting scene. Go to hell. Wang Lang's furious roar resounded in the void, and his cold, killing intent kept surging. He swore to kill Nietion with one blow. Nietion's face was as calm as still water. He didn't make a sound, but the killing intent in his eyes was even stronger than Wang Lang's. Fighting with a strong opponent made Nietion's fighting intent even stronger. Rumble. Finally, the green wolf claw collided with the huge flaming snake. In an instant, an endless amount of energy exploded, wreaking havoc in the space. An ear-piercing sound rang out, causing people to shiver in fear. Boom, boom, chi, chi, chi. Terrifying sounds could be heard continuously. Waves of power surged. The clash of absolute power caused the space to become incomparably violent. So scary. Upon seeing this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. No one had expected that Nietion would be able to fight the king wolf to such an extent. Yunxian was even more shocked when he saw the scene in front of him. He could clearly feel that Nietion's strength was even more terrifying than a few days ago. Nietion. At this time, Chun Wuqing and the others also rushed over. Seeing the terrifying scene in the sky, they couldn't help but worry for Nietion. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. At this time, the flames in the sky suddenly became stronger and countless flames exploded. Like a sky full of sharp blades, the space was filled with a sea of fire. In an instant, the flames had the absolute advantage and counterattacked like a giant beast. The green power instantly collapsed and actually disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the next moment, a blood-curdling scream rang out, and a figure was sent flying, drawing a bloody trail in the air. Leader. The bandits outside the forbidden area were stunned. Then, when they saw the figure in the sky clearly, they couldn't help but scream, and their eyes became dull. Who would have thought that the person who was sent flying was the leader of Green Wolf Bastion, Wang Lang? A peak stage high god had lost to an early stage mid god. This was too inconceivable. Wang Lang's figure suddenly moved in midair, but he soon stabilized himself. His body was covered in blood, and his face was a mess of flesh and blood. His eyes flickered with anger, shock, and killing intent, but most of all, fear. Never in his wildest dreams did he imagine that he would actually lose to an early stage mid god. Why is this happening? Wang Lang tried his best to steady himself as he murmured with a blank expression. He really couldn't understand why he would lose to a mid-level deity martial artist. Do you want to know the reason? It's very simple. Nie Tianling laughed, then took a step forward and pressed down on Wang Lang. He said in a deep voice, "Because I'm stronger than you." The killing intent in Nye Tian's eyes intensified, and the killing intent in his body shrouded Wang Lang, oppressing him. When everyone heard Nye Tian's words, they couldn't help but gasp. At the same time, they felt a chill run down their spines. An early-stage mid-god claimed that he was stronger than a pinnacle high god. This sounded like a joke, but the truth was that it was true. If Nye Tian wasn't stronger than Wang Lang, how could he possibly defeat him? Strength was always the strongest language. Impossible. I don't believe it. Wang Lang's eyes suddenly shrank. He seemed to have gone mad as he screamed in panic. Nye Tianling sneered. Then, he took another step forward and came to a place only 100 meters away from Wang Lang. He said eerily, "It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not, because today you will die here." The intense killing intent enveloped Wang Lang. The intense pressure almost suffocated him. You want to kill me?" Wang Lang's eyes trembled. Only now did he react. The fear in his heart was revealed on his face. He didn't expect that he would die here after leading all the people of the Green Wolf Bastion out. "You must die," Nye Tianling sneered. His killing intent was revealed. To defeat Wang Lang, Nye Tian had almost exhausted his star energy. How could he let Wang Lang go so easily? You can't kill me." Wang Lang felt the aura of death. His voice trembled as he said, I am swoosh." However, before Wang Lang could finish his words, a sword radiance suddenly flew out. His head flew into the air, and his blood sprayed in the air. The dignified leader of the Green Wolf Bastion didn't say his last words before he died. "It doesn't matter who you are. I don't care." Nye Tianling laughed. His eyes were full of arrogance. When the crowd saw that Wang Lang was killed by Nye Tian, they were dumbfounded. Their mouths were wide open, but no sound came out. The scene instantly fell into a dead silence. The atmosphere was so oppressive that it was suffocating. He really killed the leader? After a long time, the first one to react was Yuan Xian. He looked at Nye Tian in horror. The trembling in his voice revealed his shock. The people of the Green Wolf Bastion also reacted at this time. Their faces were full of fear. They looked at Nye Tian as if they were looking at a monster. "Big brother." At this moment, a howl sounded. Gao Fei stared at Nye Tian with bloodshot eyes. His eyes were filled with the most sincere hatred. Only now did he realize that Wang Lang had really died in the hands of Nye Tian. "You are the second leader of the Green Wolf Bastion?" Nye Tian turned slightly, looked at Gao Fei, and asked calmly. Zhao Yongji, who had died earlier, was the third leader. Wang Lang was the leader. Therefore, Gao Fei was undoubtedly the second leader. "Brat, do you know who my big brother is?" Gao Fei shouted cold. His eyes released extreme anger. "I don't know who he is, and I don't care." Nye Tian replied indifferently. He said coldly, "I only know that he brought people to Little Rock Village and wanted to kill me. That is enough." "Lunatic! You lunatic!" Gao Fei roared furiously. "My big brother is the nephew of the cloud-splitting divine palace's inner sanctum elder, Lord Wang Xianwei. You killed him, and you made a big mess. You, and everyone in Little Rock Village, must die." Nye Tian frowned slightly. There was indeed a stronger force behind the Green Wolf Bastion. However, he didn't expect that this force would be the cloud-splitting divine palace. No wonder the leader of a small mountain bastion was so arrogant. He had the support of a big shot from the cloud-splitting divine palace. Wang Lang probably wanted to use the cloud-splitting divine palace's inner sanctum elder, Wang Xianwei, before he died. However, he didn't expect that Nye Tian didn't care about this and killed him directly. "Brat, are you afraid now?" Gao Fei saw that Nye Tian was silent. He couldn't help but sneer. "You killed my big brother, which means you have offended the cloud-splitting divine palace. Even if you have heaven-defying abilities, you will only end up with death." Chapter 1578. The cloud-splitting divine palace represented the strongest force in the gods' territory. It was enough to make everyone tremble in fear. However, at this moment, Nye Tian's reaction was extremely calm, even a little disdainful. He didn't put the cloud-splitting divine palace in his eyes at all. Nia Tian didn't even care about Liu, the master of the cloud-splitting divine palace, let alone an inner elder. Moreover, Ed killed Liu's son in the divine palace competition. Nia Tian and the cloud-splitting divine palace had a deep hatred for a long time. Gao Fei actually used a small inner elder to scare Nia Tian. It was ridiculous. Go back and tell that Wang Xianwei and Liu that Nia Tian, will wait for them. Nia Tian smiled faintly and said to Gao Fei, "Brat, you." Gao Fei was stunned. He didn't expect that Nia Tian would have such a reaction. He felt suffocated and couldn't speak for a while. "Now get lost." Nia Tian didn't care about Gao Fei's reaction and said coldly and domineeringly. The reason why he let Gao Fei go was that there was still a killing formation in the forbidden area between them. If he passed through the killing formation now, it would be dangerous. When Wang Lang was in the killing formation in the forbidden area, Nia Tian didn't dare to touch the killing formation for fear of triggering it. This was an ancient killing formation. No one knew how powerful it was. Nia Tian didn't dare to take the risk. However, Gao Fei didn't have any scruples. If he triggered the killing formation, it would be terrible. On the other hand, Nia Tian faintly felt that Gao Fei's strength wasn't weaker than Wang Lang. He wasn't in a good state now. If he fought with Gao Fei, he would probably have to use the Dragon Mark Talisman. Moreover, it was hard to say who would win. After all, there were still hundreds of Green Wolf Stronghold bandits outside. In conclusion, Nia Tian used the deterrence of killing Wang Lang to temporarily make Gao Fei and the others retreat was the best choice. Gao Fei stared at Nia Tian coldly, his eyes almost spitting fire. However, he did not dare to act rashly. Nia Tian's strength had exceeded his expectations. Since he could kill Wang Lang, he could also kill him. Second head, let's leave first, Yun Xian, who was standing at the side, said hurriedly. Gao Fei glared at him cold and thought for a long time. Finally, his face darkened and he spat out a word cold. Retreat. As soon as Gao Fei's voice fell, the people of Green Wolf Bastion retreated like a receding tide, completely disappearing in the blink of an eye. Ooh! As Nia Tian watched the bandits leave, he couldn't help letting out a long sigh of relief, and his taut expression eased up quite a bit. He was really afraid that Gao Fei would take the risk and lead everyone to rush over. Nia Tian's figure landed. His face was slightly pale, but he wasn't injured at all. The battle with Wang Lang had deepened his understanding of the forbidden astral space barrier. This barrier was truly terrifying. Its only weakness was that it consumed too much star energy. With Nia Tian's current strength, he could only maintain the forbidden astral space barrier for a short period of time. However, as his strength increased and his star energy awakened, the forbidden astral space barrier would become more terrifying and last longer. Nia Tian, what kind of force is cloud-shattering divine palace? Is it very terrifying? Chen Wuqing came to Nia Tian's side and asked. He wasn't from the alert god domain, so he wasn't familiar with the forces there. He didn't even know about cloud-shattering divine palace. Nia Tian smiled faintly and briefly introduced the 12 divine palaces and cloud-shattering divine palace. Oh! Chen Wuqing nodded slightly, but his eyes kept flickering. He frowned and said, if that's the case, cloud-shattering divine palace is a peak force in the alert god domain. They must have over-god experts. How should we deal with them if they appear? There was a qualitative difference between a sovereign expert and a high god expert. Although low god, mid god, and high god were three major realms, the essence of each realm was the same. They were all about the advancement of the godhead. However, it was completely different when one reached the overgod realm. The godhead of an overgod expert would give rise to the overgod laws. This was a completely different kind of power that a high god could not contend with. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that after Nia Tian activated the forbidden astral space barrier, he could fight against a peak high god expert. However, he was powerless against an overgod expert. Even if he activated the dragon inscription talisman, he wouldn't be able to contend against an overgod expert. If Nia Tian let Gao Fei and the others leave, the latter would undoubtedly inform Cloud, shattering Divine Palace. It would be terrible if the over-god experts of Cloud, shattering Divine Palace appeared. If the people of Cloud, shattering Divine Palace know of the existence of the nine-leaf Bodhi and the name Nietian, they will definitely come to Little Rock Village. Moreover, the Palace Master of Cloud, shattering Divine Palace, will come personally. Nietian looked at Chen Wuqing and smiled calmly. Just now, he deliberately told Gao Fei his name. In fact, he wanted the latter to pass a message to Lai Yu. He wanted to tell Lai Yu that he, Nietian, had appeared in Little Rock Village. When Lai Yu heard the news about Nietian, coupled with the temptation of the nine-leaf Bodhi, he would definitely come personally. And Nietian wanted Lai Yu to come personally. At this moment, Nietian not only hoped that Lai Yu would come, but also hoped that the other forces would come. The Nine Dragons' Earth Vein was too dangerous. The previous exploration was undoubtedly a failure. Before coming into contact with the real Earth Vein, they were forced out by the Darkwing Firebat, who knew what kind of terrifying things were hidden in the Earth Vein. Nietian knew that with their strength, it was almost impossible to enter the Nine Dragons' Earth Vein. Therefore, it was better to borrow the strength of other experts. What do you mean? Chen Wuqing was very smart and immediately understood Nietian's meaning. He asked doubtfully, if the Palace Master of Cloud, shattering Divine Palace, comes, are you still going to cooperate with him? With his status, he won't cooperate obediently, right? The Palace Master of Cloud, shattering Divine Palace, was definitely a peak over-god expert. It was definitely impossible for him to cooperate with someone with the strength of Nietian. Wasn't Nietian inviting the Palace Master of Cloud, shattering Divine Palace, the same as inviting a wolf into the house? It's definitely impossible for the Palace Master of Cloud, shattering Divine Palace, to cooperate with me. In his opinion, I don't have the qualifications to cooperate with him. Nietian smiled faintly, then looked at Yang Zhongxiu and said, but Elder Yang should have the qualifications, right? That's right, Yang Zhongxiu. This was the person that Nietian wanted to cooperate with. Lai Yu would not put Nietian in his eyes, but Yang Zhongxiu was different. No matter what, he was an elder of the Holy Assembly. Even if he was an outer sect elder, his status was not low. Yang Zhongxiu was taken aback, then reacted. He was actually a little flattered. He did not expect that he was so important in Nietian's eyes. Elder Yang, I think you should have something on you that can prove your identity. Nietian looked at Yang Zhongxiu and smiled faintly. Of course. Yang Zhongxiu smiled, then took out a token and said, this is the token of an elder of the Holy Assembly. Someone with the status of the Palace Master of Cloud, shattering Divine Palace, can be recognized with a glance. Very good. Nietian nodded slightly. With Yang Zhongxiu around, no matter how arrogant Lai Yu was, he would definitely restrain himself. Lord Nietian, I have a wish. I hope that Lord Nietian can help me. Yang Zhongxiu's eyes flickered as he suddenly spoke. What wish? Nietian's eyes narrowed. He did not expect this guy to take the opportunity to make a request. Plop. Suddenly, Yang Zhongxiu took a step back and knelt in front of Nietian. Nietian was stunned and asked in surprise, Elder Yang, what are you doing? Yang Zhongxiu's action stunned Nietian. He did not know what Yang Zhongxiu wanted to do. Lord Nietian, please ask Lord Chinchilla to accept me as a disciple. Yang Zhongxiu looked at Nietian with a solemn face and said in a deep voice. Chapter 1579. Nietian looked at Yang Zhongxiu, who was kneeling in front of him, and his expression became slightly embarrassed. He didn't expect that Yang Zhongxiu actually wanted to be Fat Cat's disciple. This condition seemed very small and almost ridiculous. However, Nietian knew how terrifying Fat Cat was after getting along with him. It was no exaggeration to say that no one was more knowledgeable than Fat Cat in the entire Nine Realms. After the little Fat Cat appeared, even Sakura didn't speak anymore and obediently followed behind as a younger brother. Yang Zhongxiu wanted to be Fat Cat's disciple. It had to be said that Yang Zhongxiu had good vision. The relationship between Nietian and Fat Cat looked like master and pet to outsiders, but in fact it was not. The two were in a cooperative relationship, very equal. Therefore, Nietian didn't have the right to ask Fat Cat to accept Yang Zhongxiu as a disciple. It was up to Fat Cat to decide whether to accept Yang Zhongxiu as a disciple or not. Fat, you deal with this yourself. Nietian looked at Yang Zhongxiu's solemn expression and could only smile bitterly. He called out Fat Cat. Fat Cat's figure appeared and lay on Nietian's shoulder. A pair of blue eyes looked at Yang Zhongxiu with a completely disdainful look. Nietian was speechless. No matter how bad Yang Zhongxiu was, he was still an elder of the Holy Council. There was no need to be so disdainful. Old man Yang, do you really want me to be your disciple? Fat Cat thought for a moment and stretched his waist, looking like he was asking for a beating. Lord Chinchilla, Yang Zhongxiu sincerely wants to be your disciple. Please accept me as your disciple, Lord Chinchilla. Yang Zhongxiu bowed deeply. He actually had a posture of not standing up until he succeeded. Fat Cat's figure moved and looked at Yang Zhongxiu. He curled his lips and said, "You are too old, your strength is too weak, and your talent is too poor. I really have no interest in accepting you as a disciple." Fat Nietian was speechless. He transmitted his voice and said, "Even if you don't like Yang Zhongxiu, you could just reject him directly. There's no need to be so hurtful." Fat Cat raised her eyebrows, but ignored Nietian. Then she chuckled and said, "Fortunately, you are very sincere and have good willpower. For the sake of Nietian, I will reluctantly accept you as an in-name disciple. As for whether you can become a true disciple in the future, that will depend on your performance." Nietian was stunned. Fat Cat was really cunning. She first belittled Yang Zhongxiu and then took him in as a disciple. This was obviously the rhythm of giving a carrot after a slap. Disciple thanks teacher. When Yang Zhongxiu heard that Fat Cat had really accepted him as a disciple, he couldn't help but be overjoyed and kowtowed repeatedly. The others who were watching from the side were stunned. Their expressions were as if they had seen a ghost. A dignified elder of the Holy Parliament had become the disciple of a cat, and in the end, he had become an in-name disciple. What was wrong with this world? "All right, you can get up." Fat Cat casually waved her hand and said, "In the future, your attitude towards Nietian must be the same as how you treat me. Understand? Disciple will remember." Yang Zhongxiu stood up and bowed deeply. His attitude was very respectful. Nietian smiled slightly. On the surface, he restrained himself, but in his heart, he was already very happy. Yang Zhongxiu had become Fat Cat's disciple. In this way, it was equivalent to Nietian having absolute control over Yang Zhongxiu. The following matters would be much easier to handle. After successfully becoming a disciple, everyone didn't waste any time and returned to the forbidden area. "Grandpa!" At this time, a sorrowful cry sounded. It was actually Yuntian. Nietian and the others walked over and saw Yun Qing fainted in Yuntian's arms. He had already lost all signs of life. Nietian's eyes slightly narrowed, and his expression couldn't help but become somewhat solemn. He knew that Yun Qing's time was up, but he didn't expect it to be so sudden. Yun Qing was a peak mid-deity, but when his time was up, he was still so weak. "Yin Tan, restrain your grief." Nietian took a step forward and said in a deep voice. Before Yun Qing died, he must have told Yin Tian many things. The future of Little Rock Village would be in Yun Tian's hands. After a short while, the villagers of Little Rock Village arrived and started to prepare for Yun Qing's funeral. "I hope the people from Cloud Splitting Divine Palace will arrive later, so that Elder Yun can rest in peace," Nietian sighed and said in his heart. Nietian and the others left one after another. Yun Qing was a villager of Little Rock Village, while they were outsiders. It was better not to get involved in his funeral. Nietian parted ways with the others and went to a valley by himself. It would probably take a few more days for the people from Cloud Splitting Divine Palace to arrive. In the following days, Nietian planned to cultivate diligently and strive to raise his strength to mid-stage mid-deity. In a valley, Nietian took out a piece of divine spark. It was the size of a human head, crystal clear, and radiated a dazzling light. The divine spark of a peak high god, It must contain extremely terrifying energy, murmured Nyetian as he looked at the divine spark in his hand. The divine spark in his hand was the divine spark of Wang Lang, the leader of the Green Wolf Bastion. However, it had become an ownerless divine spark as Nyetian had already erased Wang Lang's consciousness. When Nyetian held the divine spark, he felt a strange feeling in his body, as though the dragon mark talisman in his body had become agitated. Why would the dragon mark talisman have such a reaction? Nyetian couldn't help but feel puzzled. He took out a few more pieces of divine spark, but failed to trigger any reaction from the dragon mark talisman. Is there something different about Wang Lang's divine spark? Nyetian was even more puzzled. He probed the divine spark with his consciousness, but didn't discover anything unusual. At this time, Fat Cat suddenly appeared and said with a mischievous smile, "Nyetian, try releasing the dragon mark talisman and see if it can absorb the energy from the divine spark." Nyetian was stunned. He looked at Fat Cat and said with a smile, "Fat, you are thinking too much. The energy in the divine spark is very stable. How can it be absorbed directly?" The divine spark of a martial artist was similar to the divine core of a divine beast. Both were condensed from the essence of energy and were very stable. Generally, only divine pills refined by a divine alchemist could be absorbed by a martial artist. It was impossible to directly absorb the energy from a divine spark. How would you know if you don't try? Little Fat Cat smiled strangely, a strange look in its eyes. Nyetian was dazed for a second, but he decided to give it a try. With a thought, the dragon mark talisman was released. The talisman's energy spread out like tentacles and enveloped the divine spark. In the next moment, a strange scene happened. The instant the dragon mark forbidden talisman spread out, the godhead actually sensed it and released a pure energy that fused with the talisman. As the dragon mark talisman released its energy, the dragon mark talisman became more violent. The energy inside the talisman grew stronger and stronger as it absorbed the energy from the divine spark. Nyetian was stunned by the scene in front of him. His eyes trembled and he said in a daze, "How is this possible?" The dragon mark talisman could directly absorb energy from the divine spark. This was too scary. Nyetian had a lot of divine sparks in his hands. Didn't this mean that the dragon mark talisman could become stronger quickly? Chapter 1580. In the valley, Nyetian's expression was sluggish, and he didn't have any reaction for a long time. What the hell is this dragon rune talisman? How can it directly absorb energy from a godhead? Nyetian, look carefully. What is the energy being absorbed by the dragon rune talisman? Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded in Nyetian's mind, filled with complacency. Hearing Fat Cat's words, Nyetian was dazed for a moment. Then he stared fixedly at the godhead. After a long time, he finally realized something and blurted out, "The dragon rune talisman is absorbing the bloodline power inside the godhead." Nyetian discovered that the dragon rune talisman wasn't absorbing all of the godhead's power, but a purer kind of energy, the bloodline power inside the godhead. Wang Lang was a bloodline martial artist. His godhead contained the Azure Wolf's bloodline power, and the dragon rune talisman was absorbing this bloodline power. Could it be that the dragon rune talisman can only absorb the bloodline power inside the godhead? Nyetian immediately realized why the dragon rune talisman didn't have any reaction to other godheads, and only reacted to Wang Lang's godhead, because Wang Lang was a bloodline martial artist. Exactly. Fat Cat grinned and nodded. This lord has thoroughly examined the dragon rune talisman. The talisman's power is limited, but the most terrifying part is that it can stimulate a martial artist's bloodline power. The dragon rune talisman is very strange. It seems to be very sensitive to bloodline power. Not only can it stimulate bloodline power, it can also absorb bloodline power. So that's how it is. Nyetian let out a long breath, and his expression became much calmer. If the dragon rune talisman could really absorb the bloodline power from a godhead, then it would be too terrifying. However, the fact that the dragon rune talisman could absorb bloodline power was already very abnormal. Since the Dragon Rune Talisman had become stronger, yet Tion's martial physique and bloodline power had also been greatly enhanced. Yet Tion, the Dragon Rune Talisman in your body is still not strong enough. It can only absorb bloodline power slowly. Fat Cat smiled faintly and said, "The Azure Wolf's bloodline power inside this godhead will need at least a few days to be completely absorbed." Yes, Tion nodded. He had already felt that the Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman's absorption ability was not strong. Perhaps it was because the talisman was not strong enough. After the Fat Cat opened the 3 Forbidden Technique scrolls, Tion was ready to cultivate the complete Dragon Mark Forbidden Talisman. As for the other 2 Forbidden Techniques, if possible, Tion was also prepared to cultivate them. In the following days, Tion used the Dragon Mark Talisman to absorb the bloodline power from the godhead. A few days later, he sensed that the bloodline power in his godhead was extremely weak, so he stopped absorbing it and began to cultivate. After another 3 days, Tion's bitter cultivation ended, and he stood up once more. His entire body emitted an extremely sharp aura, and his entire person emitted a different kind of sharpness. In 3 days, I've finally broken through to the mid-stage, mid-god realm, Tion muttered. The corners of his mouth curled into a satisfied smile. After absorbing the bloodline power from the godhead and cultivating bitterly, Tion's strength improved once again, reaching the mid-stage, mid-god realm. Other than the enhancement of his devil yuan, the most important reason for the improvement of his strength was that Tion had awakened another 4 of the 3,000 strands of Fiend God energy in his Fiend God nascent embryo. At this moment, he had awakened 8 strands of Fiend God energy. 8 strands of Fiend God energy was far from 3,000 strands of Fiend God energy, but it was already very good. Tion could feel that his martial body had become much stronger. It's been 7 to 8 days. Why haven't the people from Cloud-Shattering Divine Palace arrived? Tion walked out of the valley and couldn't help but frown. He had originally predicted that the people from Cloud-Shattering Divine Palace would arrive within 5 days. But he didn't expect that after 8 days, there would still be no movement from them. Tion, Chen Wuqing's figure immediately appeared after walking out of the valley. When he sensed that Tion's aura had changed, Chen Wuqing was surprised. Then, a bitter expression appeared on his face. He and Tion hadn't known each other for a long time, but he had watched Tion grow up. When he first met Tion, the latter only had the strength of a low god. But now he had already reached the mid-stage mid-god realm, just like him. Such a speed of improvement could no longer be described as abnormal. It could only be described as hair-raising. Chen Wuqing felt that even those top-notch geniuses from the 3 upper realms would be overshadowed in front of Tion. Tion's innate talent was too terrifying. Whether it was innate talent in martial arts, aptitude in martial body, heart of martial arts, or innate talent in combat, he was one of a kind. Chen Wuqing was sincerely happy to be able to get to know such a martial artist. Big brother Tion, your strength has improved again. At this time, Ed's figure also appeared. He was smiling mischievously. He was very happy. Tion nodded slightly. Only now did he realize that Ed had also advanced to the mid-stage low god realm. No wonder he was so happy. Lord Tion. Yang Zhongxiu came and bowed slightly, appearing very respectful. Elder Yang, you don't have to be so polite. Just call me Tion. Tion smiled faintly. He was not used to Yang Zhongxiu's attitude. How can I do that? Zhongxiu wouldn't dare to neglect master's order. Yang Zhongxiu's face was solemn and firm. Tion's face darkened. He could only let him do as he pleased. Big brother Tion. At this time, a familiar voice sounded. Then, Yin Tian appeared. He was very steady. He quickly came to Tion's side and said in a deep voice, "They're here. Clouds splitting Divine Palace. They're finally here." Tion smiled faintly. His eyes flickered with a strange light. The people of Cloud splitting Divine Palace had finally arrived. "Let's go." Tion looked at Yin Tian and said calmly. At this moment, Yin Tian seemed to have changed into a different person. He wasn't as rash as before. His eyes were firm, and his expression was very steady. It was as if he had transformed from a boy into a real man overnight. Nie Tian knew that Yin Qing's death must have had a huge impact on Yin Tian, causing him to grow up so quickly. Humans were like this. If they didn't experience some things, they would never grow up. Yin Qing's death was a blow to Yin Tian, but it was also a transformation. Yin Tian was now the new village chief of Little Rock Village. The heavy burden on his shoulders forced him to grow up. After a while, Nie Tian and the others arrived at the periphery of the forbidden area. Outside the forbidden killing array, a group of black figures appeared. Looking at it, there were at least 1,000 people. Nie Tian saw two familiar figures in the crowd. They were Yin Xian and Gao Fei. Traitor! Yin Tian looked at Yin Xian and roared. His eyes flickered with terrifying anger, but he didn't attack. Obviously, he was suppressing his impulse. If it was in the past, Yin Tian would have rushed out. At this moment, Nie Tian noticed that there was a burly old man standing in front of Gao Fei. His figure was like a mountain standing in midair. His eyes flickered with malice as he stared at Nie Tian. This burly old man was none other than Wang Xianwei, the inner sect elder of Shattering Cloud Divine Palace. At the same time, he was Wang Lang's uncle. Lord Wang, this is the person who killed Brother Wang Lang. Gao Fei took a step forward and said in a deep voice behind Wang Xianwei. Wang Xianwei's pair of cold eyes stared at Nie Tian, but he didn't make any move. Palace Master Shattering Cloud, are you still not coming out? Nie Tian's eyes swept across the crowd and stopped on Wang Xianwei for a moment. Then, he said in a deep voice, which was extremely provocative, Nie Tian, it's really you. In the next moment, the void outside the forbidden area trembled slightly. Then, a figure appeared. His aura was like a mountain as he stood there, releasing a mighty aura. It was Palace Master Shattering Cloud, Lai Yu. At the same time, the void beside him also trembled slightly. Then, another figure appeared. Her white clothes fluttered in the wind, like a fairy in the wind. Her beauty was enough to shake the mortal world. When this figure appeared, a pair of eyes stared at Nie Tian calmly. Chapter 1581. Luo Zian, why are you here? Nie Tian looked at the alluring white-clothed figure in midair. After a long time, he calmed down and asked in a deep voice. He didn't expect that Luo Zian would appear here. It seemed that she had come with Palace Master Lai Yin. During the grand competition of the 12 Shrine, Luo Zian had betrayed Lai Yu. This pair of master and disciple had become enemies. Who would have thought that the two would appear together again? And they seemed to be very harmonious. Nie Tian remembered that when he wanted to kill Luo Zian, she was rescued by one of the 3 major mysterious organizations, Thousand Feathers Building. The person who rescued Luo Zian was a supreme god martial artist. Nie Tian clearly remembered this person's name, Heya. At that time, Heya not only rescued Luo Zian, but also wanted to kill Nie Tian. However, he was stopped by Holy Assembly Elder Yangwu. Nie Tian, long time no see. Luo Zian's eyes were gloomy. Her eyes were filled with bone-chilling coldness. Even her voice was releasing a chilling intent. Luo Zian, you're lucky that I didn't kill you. Now, you dare to appear in front of me again. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you again? Nie Tianling laughed, his eyes moving between Luo Zian and Lai Yu. He found that Lai Yu's attitude towards Luo Zian seemed to have changed subtly. He seemed to be extremely afraid of Luo Zian, even a little terrified. Nie Tian sensed that Luo Zian's current strength was at the mid-stage of mid-god, which wasn't too strong. When Luo Zian participated in the grand competition of the Divine Palace, she had been forcibly suppressing her strength to the peak of low god. It was not surprising that her strength had improved after the grand competition of the Divine Palace ended. However, the current Nie Tian was no longer afraid of Luo Zian. The latter's greatest advantage was the 1,000 clouds boundary of the 1,000 clouds dark body. Nie Tian was confident that his Starry River ward would be able to break the 1,000 clouds ward with ease. Nie Tian, you intentionally spread the news to draw Palace Master Lai Yun here. It ought to not be for the sake of killing, right? Luo Xian's gaze was icy cold and murderous as she spoke indifferently, and her voice revealed a coldness that couldn't be eliminated. Nie Tian was slightly stunned. It seemed that Luo Xian already knew everything and guessed his intentions. Luo Xian was an extremely scheming person, and she understood Nie Tian very well. It was not surprising that she could guess Nie Tian's thoughts. At that moment, both Yun Xian and Gao Fei were stunned. They were both intelligent people. After hearing Luo Xian's words, they immediately understood that Nie Tian had deliberately let them go back then. It was only so that they could bring a message to Palace Master Lai Yun. This kid is really scheming. Yun Xian's eyes trembled as he thought to himself. Wang Xianwei's reaction was extremely calm, but the viciousness in her eyes gradually intensified. Nie Tian, what are you trying to do by drawing this palace master here? Lai Yu took a step forward and spoke in a deep voice. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He did not beat around the bush and said directly, I don't want to do anything. I just want to cooperate with Palace Master. Cooperate? Lai Yu was stunned for a moment, and then he sneered. With a face full of disdain, he mocked, I'm the Palace Master of the strongest divine palace in the God Domain, Lai Yun Divine Palace, and you're just a small fry in the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Is there a need for us to cooperate? It was obvious that Lai Yu did not put Nie Tian in his eyes at all. In his opinion, Nie Tian was just a small grasshopper. No matter how much he jumped, he could not overturn the heavens. As long as he was willing, he could crush Nie Tian at any time. Lai Yu knew that there must be a big secret in the forbidden area of Little Rock Village. However, he did not need to cooperate with Nie Tian at all. He alone was enough. Nie Tian, you're too naive. At this moment, Luo Xian's voice rang out. She said cold, Palace Master Lai Yun has the strength of a peak over God. He's a peak expert in the God domain. On the other hand, you're just a mid-stage mid-god. What qualifications do you have to cooperate with Palace Master Lai Yun? Nie Tian shook his head and smiled. He had long known that Lai Yu and Luo Xian would have such a reaction. Palace Master, I indeed don't have the qualifications to cooperate with you. At this moment, Nie Tian smiled faintly. Then, he looked at Yang Zhongxiu behind him and said, But Elder Yang should have the qualifications, right? Lai Yu frowned slightly. Then, his eyes locked onto Yang Zhongxiu. He could not help but sneer. His eyes were even more mocking as he said, This old man only has the strength of an early-stage mid-god. Do you think he has the qualifications? Palace Master Lai Yun, please speak with some respect. Yang Zhongxiu growled. Then he flashed a token in his hand and said in a deep voice, You should recognize this token. This is... Lai Yu's expression changed when he saw the token in Yang Zhongxiu's hand. His expression clearly stiffened. He said in a daze, The token of an elder of the Holy Assembly. Lai Yun, you're not too stupid. Yang Zhongxiu smiled cold and said, Since you recognize this token, then you should know my identity. I was blind and failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive me, Elder Yang. Lai Yu recovered and hurriedly bowed and apologized. Forget it. Yang Zhongxiu waved his hand casually and said, Palace Master Lai Yun, do I have the qualifications to cooperate with you? Lai Yu's expression stiffened. It was as ugly as it could be. He hurriedly nodded and said, Yes, of course. He had never thought that there would be an elder of the Holy Assembly by Nie Tian's side. Luo Xian was also dumbfounded watching from the side. The development of the matter had exceeded her expectations. The others became even more dumbfounded. Who would have thought that the unremarkable old man was actually an elder of the Holy Assembly? Palace Master Lai Yun, since you agree to cooperate, then the following matters will be easy to handle. Yang Zhongxiu smiled faintly. He then looked at Nie Tian. The latter nodded slightly. The two of them no longer hesitated and directly entered the forbidden killing array. They actually walked out of the forbidden area. Chun Wuqing and the others were suddenly stunned. Cold sweat seeped out of their foreheads. Lai Yu and Luo Xian were also stunned for a moment. They couldn't help but look at each other. They didn't expect that Nie Tian and Yang Zhongxiu would actually dare to walk out of the forbidden area. If Lai Yu made a move at this time, he could definitely kill Nie Tian and Yang Zhongxiu easily. Luo Xian's eyes were filled with killing intent. But Lai Yu shook his head, indicating that she shouldn't act rashly. Lai Yu thought that since Yang Zhongxiu was an elder of the Holy Assembly, there would definitely be an expert protecting him. It might even be a supreme, god-level expert hiding in the dark and not being detected by them. If they made a move, that expert in the dark would absolutely not hesitate to kill them. Luo Xian clearly had the same apprehension. She thought for a while and finally endured. Nie Tian saw Lai Yu's and Luo Xian's reactions and smiled faintly in his heart. He precisely grasped the two people's weakness of being smart and suspicious. That was why he swaggered out. How could Lai Yu and Luo Xian know that the expert in the dark that they were suspicious of did not exist at all? However, Nie Tian's move was indeed very risky. If Lai Yu really made a move, he would be in danger. But then again, doing anything had risks. If one didn't do it because there were risks, then one was destined to achieve nothing. The reason why Nie Tian risked his life to walk out was naturally because he had his own purpose. Chapter 1582. When Yang Zhongxiu and Nie Tian walked out, Lai Yu and Luo Xian landed. Luo Xian took a step forward and arrived in front of Nie Tian. She stared at the latter coldly, her eyes filled with bottomless gloom. Nie Tian noticed that Lai Yu actually intentionally or unintentionally avoided Luo Xian, and he stood behind Luo Xian, appearing to be extremely cautious. Luo Xian no longer addressed Lai Yu as teacher, but cloud-splitting palace master. It seemed that Lai Yu and Luo Xian were no longer master and disciple, but master and servant. That's right, master and servant. Luo Xian was the master, while Lai Yu was the servant. Could cloud-splitting divine palace be controlled by thousand feather building? Nie Tian was puzzled and guessed. Luo Xian was rescued by the people of Qianyu Building. Qianyu Building's influence was far greater than cloud-splitting divine palace. If Qianyu Building controlled cloud-splitting divine palace, then it wouldn't be surprising for Lai Yu to be so respectful towards Luo Xian. Thousand Feather Building. What kind of organization is this? Nie Tian frowned and forced himself not to think too much. He didn't care what happened between Thousand Feather Building and cloud-splitting divine palace. The most important thing now was to borrow Lai Yu's strength to enter the Nine Dragons Earth Vein. Nie Tian, how do you want to cooperate? Luo Xian looked at Nie Tian and asked cold. She didn't like empty things. Although Nie Tian was borrowing Yang Zhongxiu's identity, the mastermind was obviously Nie Tian. Yang Zhongxiu was just a tool. Elder Yang is here because he was appointed by the Holy Council to investigate a Mother Earth elemental stone mine. We have already discovered the location of the Origin Earthstone vein, and now we need some helpers. With a calm expression, Nie Tian said indifferently, therefore, our cooperation is very simple. We'll enter the underground mine together, thoroughly explore the mine, and conveniently take away some Origin Earthstones. If the cooperation goes well, cloud-splitting divine palace can get a share of the Origin Earthstones. How about it? After saying that, Nie Tian looked at Luo Xian indifferently, waiting for the latter to give a response. At this time, when Lai Yu and the others heard what Nie Tian said, their eyes changed. Everyone knew how precious the Origin Earthstone was. The value of an Origin Earthstone mineral vein was immeasurable. It was no wonder that the elders of the Holy Parliament would appear here. They had actually discovered the Mother Earth mine. Earth Origin Stone vein? However, Luo Xian's reaction was very calm. Her beautiful eyes flickered, and she was obviously suspicious of something. She said, the Origin Earthstone isn't of much help to you. Why do you need it? The Origin Earthstone was of great help to a martial artist, but Nie Tian had already obtained a piece of the Origin Earthstone after becoming the Lesser God Chief. Why would he still need to investigate the Origin Earthstone mine? Moreover, with Nie Tian's strength and talent, he did not need the Origin Earthstone at all. This is my business. You don't have to worry about it, Nie Tianling replied coldly. Sure. Luo Xian let out a strange laugh, then said, but I want to take a look at the primordial stone mine first. No problem. Nie Tian's reaction was very straightforward. He believed that Luo Xian would definitely not be able to see the Nine Dragons Earth vein. All right, Then let's go in and take a look. Luo Zian nodded slightly and gestured for Nie Tian to lead the way. From the beginning to the end, Yang Zhongxiu and Lai Yu did not speak. Only Nie Tian and Luo Zian were talking. Get out of the way. Nie Tian was walking in front of Luo Zian when he suddenly heard a cold voice behind him. He couldn't help but turn around. Behind Nie Tian stood a skinny young martial artist. He looked to be in his 20s, but his real age was probably a few thousand years old. This person stood beside Luo Zian, looking like a flower protector. He actually did not allow Nie Tian to get close to Luo Zian. Nie Tian scanned this person with his consciousness. This person had the strength of a mid-stage high god, which was not bad. So arrogant? Nie Tian swept his gaze across the other party and smiled faintly. Obviously, this guy was a fanatical pursuer of Luo Zian and wanted to show off in front of her. Stinking brat, I know you're Nie Tian. I also know that you and junior apprentice sister Zian once had something going on, but that's all in the past. If you still dare to have improper thoughts about her, don't blame me for being impolite. The skinny young man said in a cold and disdainful manner, You are the leader of the low god leaders. I, Liliang, am not inferior to you, because I was the leader of the low god leaders in the last grand competition of the 12 shrines. Is that so? Nie Tian laughed. So this person was the leader of the low god leaders. No wonder he was so arrogant. Now get lost, Li Liang said in a cold and extremely arrogant manner. Nie Tian shook his head. He really did not want to get angry with this kind of person. Senior apprentice brother Li, step back. However, at this moment, Luo Zian suddenly spoke. Her cold eyes swept across Li Liang's body as she spoke coldly. Li Liang's expression froze. His eyes were extremely strange. Then, he took a step back and locked his gaze on Nie Tian. He was extremely resentful. He thought that Luo Zian was angry because of Nie Tian, so he became even more hostile towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian shook his head again. This Li Liang did not understand the situation at all. Nie Tian already had a girl 1,000 times better than Luo Zian. Why would he be interested in her? Moreover, Li Liang did not understand Luo Zian at all. Even if he was the leader of the low god leaders in the last grand competition, there was no way he could pursue Luo Zian. What Luo Zian wanted was too great. This was something that Li Liang was far from being able to give. Perhaps in Luo Zian's eyes, Li Liang was just a stepping stone. After using him, she would immediately give up. Nie Tian led Luo Zian and the others into the forbidden area and directly arrived at the entrance of the ley line. When they saw the scene above the ley line abyss, everyone was dumbfounded. Even a strong practitioner like Lai Yu couldn't help but be dumbfounded. He was speechless for a long time. It is indeed the aura of the Mother Earth origin stone. After a long time, Luo Zian's flickering, beautiful eyes calmed down. She had the 1,000 clouds dark body, so her perception was far stronger than ordinary martial artists. Of course, she could sense the aura of the Mother Earth origin stone. How is it? Do you believe me now? Nie Tian smiled faintly. He could see the passion in Luo Zian's eyes. It was obvious that she was moved. All right. Luo Zian calmed down and nodded heavily. The corner of her mouth actually curled up into a smile for the first time. She said, I wish us a happy cooperation. Nie Tian nodded with a smile, but in his heart he said, Luo Zian, how can we possibly have a happy cooperation? Nie Tian, the Nine Dragons' Earth Vein is extremely dangerous. You must be careful. It is not wise to place your bet on Cloud shattering Divine Palace. At this moment, Sakura's voice suddenly rang out and reminded him solemnly. I know. Nie Tian's gaze focused slightly. He knew what Sakura was worried about. In the Nine Dragons' Earth Vein, there was a high possibility that there were very strong, ferocious beasts hidden. With just Lai Yu's strength, he might not be able to enter the ley line. Moreover, Lai Yu obviously wouldn't protect Nie Tian and the others. It was really too stupid to place all his bets on Cloud shattering Divine Palace. Nie Tian, when can we enter the mineral vein? Luo Zian obviously couldn't wait any longer as she asked directly. There's no hurry. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, I still have to wait for a few collaborators. In? Luo Xian frowned slightly and said solemnly, "What do you mean?" Chapter 1583. When Luo Xin heard Nye Tan mention the 4 great celestial palaces, her beautiful eyes flickered and she said solemnly, "You don't believe us? If I said I believe you, would you believe me?" Nye Tan laughed and said, "We have to wait for the other 3 great celestial palaces to come, otherwise we won't enter the mineral vein." Elder Yang, what does Nye Tian mean by this? Lai Yu couldn't hold it in anymore and asked cold. "We will listen to Lord Nye Tian's arrangement." Yang Zhongxiu stared at Lai Yu cold, appearing extremely domineering. Lai Yu was stunned for a moment. He could tell that Yang Zhongxiu was extremely respectful towards Nye Tian and simply listened to his every word. He couldn't understand why an elder of the Holy Parliament would be so respectful to Nye Tian. "How long do we have to wait?" Luo Xian calmed down and asked cold. "The other 3 great celestial palaces don't know yet. I will have to trouble Palace Master Lai Yu to send someone to inform them." Nye Tian smiled faintly and looked at Lai Yu. Lai Yu frowned and his face was extremely ugly. Nye Tian was too much. He actually asked Lai Yu to send someone to inform the other 3 great celestial palaces. He was simply asking for a yard after taking an inch. "Brat, who do you think you are? Do you think you can mobilize the people of cloud-shattering Celestial Palace?" At this time, an angry voice sounded and a figure stepped out. His aura was like a mountain pressing down on Nye Tian. Nye Tian was stunned. His body shook and a sword aura soared to the sky, blocking this person's aura. Nye Tian forcefully stabilized his body and saw that the person who attacked him was none other than the inner court elder of cloud-shattering Celestial Palace, Wang Xianwei. "Palace Master Lai Yu, what is the meaning of this?" In the next moment, Yang Zhongqiu's angry roar sounded. "Wang Xianwei, stop." Lai Yu reacted and took a step out, forcefully breaking the pressure of Wang Xianwei's aura, forcing the latter to take a few steps back. "Lord Palace Master." Wang Xianwei stabilized his figure. Seeing that Lai Yu was enraged, he hurriedly bowed. His nephew, Wang Lang, was killed by Nye Tian. He came here to avenge Wang Lang. However, who would have thought that Nye Tian had only taken a glance at him and then completely ignored him? Wang Xianwei already had a belly full of anger. Now that she heard that Nye Tian wanted to cooperate with the other 3 sacred palaces, she could no longer control the anger in her heart. That was why she attacked in anger. "Impudent." Lai Yu looked at Wang Xianwei cold and rebuked in a deep voice. "This palace lord is here. When is it your turn to make a move?" "This subordinate was reckless. Please forgive me, Palace Master." Wang Xianwei was scared out of his wits, cold sweat dripping down his forehead, and he quickly bowed his head to admit his mistake. "Back off." Lai Yu berated coldly and no longer said anything. He was also just putting on an act for Yang Zhongqiu to see. "Wait." However, at this moment, Nye Tian laughed and took a step forward. He looked at Wang Xianwei with a strange gaze and said indifferently, "Since Lord Wang Xianwei has so much energy, why not let him go and inform the other 3 sacred palaces? How about it?" "This." Lai Yu was stunned. He didn't think that Nye Tian would raise such a condition. A dignified intersect elder running errands was really too much. "Palace Master Lai Yun, this elder feels that Lord Nye Tian's suggestion is very good." Yang Zhongxiu laughed and said indifferently, "All right." Lai Yu had a helpless look. He frowned at Wang Xianwei and said solemnly, "Elder Wang, you will personally bring people to inform Heaven Sword Divine Palace, Medicine King Divine Palace, and Red Moon Divine Palace. Palace Master Lai Yun, I must see the palace masters of the other 3 sacred palaces appear." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said very proudly. Lai Yu nodded helplessly. How could he not know that Nye Tian cooperated with the other 3 sacred palaces to restrain him? It was too risky to cooperate with Cloud, splitting Divine Palace alone. If Lai Yu took the risk and wanted to kill Nye Tian, it would be troublesome. With the restraint of the other 3 sacred palaces, Lai Yu had to be cautious in everything he did. According to Nye Tian's knowledge, Heaven Sword Divine Palace, Medicine King Divine Palace and Cloud Splitting Divine Palace were sworn enemies. So, it was impossible for them to cooperate. The reason why he allowed Red Moon Divine Palace to join was because Nie Tian had some understanding of Qi Yefeng. With Yi Qinghai's deterrence, Nie Tian believed that Qi Yefeng should have some scruples. Wang Xianwei's face was extremely ugly. After coming to Little Stone Village, not only did he not take revenge, but he also had to go out and run errands for Nie Tian. How could he feel good? Lord Wang Xianwei, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and go. Nie Tian smiled faintly and was extremely provocative. Wang Xianwei looked helpless and turned to leave angrily. Cloud-splitting palace lord, before the people from the other 3 sacred palaces arrive, please wait outside the forbidden area. Nie Tian looked at Wang Xianwei's figure as he left, then turned to look at Lai Yu and said indifferently. Lai Yu's face was ugly. He felt that his chest was blocked and he couldn't spit it out. But he had no choice. After thinking for a while, he decided to wait outside the forbidden area. Nie Tian. At this time, an unfriendly voice suddenly sounded. Nie Tian turned around and saw that it was Li Liang. What advice do you have for me? Nie Tian asked with a smile. He glanced at Luo Zian and immediately realized something. Li Liang crossed his arms over his chest and said arrogantly, Nie Tian, you're the champion of this year's Lesser Divine Palace tournament. I'd like to exchange some pointers with you. Do you dare to accept? Nie Tian laughed strangely. He didn't look at Li Liang at all. Instead, he looked at Luo Zian and said, Luo Zian, if you want to test my strength, why don't you do it yourself? Are you afraid that you are not my match? How could Nie Tian not see that Li Liang had obviously been hinted by Luo Zian to test his strength? Whatever you think. Luo Zian's expression was cold. Do you dare to accept Senior Brother Li's challenge? Her cold voice was extremely provocative. Luo Zian was indeed very afraid of Nie Tian. Moreover, the speed at which Nie Tian's strength increased was too terrifying. It was far beyond her expectations. Previously, when Nie Tian was only an early-stage low god, he could defeat Luo Zian, who had the strength of a peak low god. At this time, their strength was the same. Luo Zian was even less likely to be Nie Tian's match. Therefore, she hinted to Li Liang to have him test Nie Tian's strength. Li Liang was the leader of the last low god tournament. His strength was at mid-stage high god. He was an entire realm higher than Nie Tian. He should be able to completely suppress Nie Tian. It was very suitable for him to fight. Moreover, Luo Zian knew that Nie Tian was definitely not the kind of person who would shy away from battle. He would definitely accept the challenge. You guys are too shameless. At this moment, Ed suddenly stood up and said with a look of disdain, this guy is already several thousand years old. He's not even from the same era as Big Brother Nie Tian. What's the point of this kind of challenge? Li Liang wasn't very old, but compared to Nie Tian, he could totally be said to be a martial artist of the older generation. This kind of challenge was indeed a little bullying. Nie Tian, it's fine if you're afraid. I, Li Liang, am not the kind of person who would force others to do things against their will. Li Liang sneered. The provocation in his words was even more intense. Afraid? Abruptly, Nie Tian raised his head and looked at Li Liang. Cold, he said, would I be afraid of a person who insists on courting death? Li Liang was startled. He actually sensed intense contempt from Nie Tian's eyes. Chapter 1584. Nie Tian's face was gloomy, his eyes brimming with killing intent. Brat, who are you calling a dog? Li Liang was immediately angered by Nie Tian's scolding of him as a biting dog. His eyes similarly revealed killing intent as he bellowed in a deep voice. Nie Tianling laughed, then glanced at Luo Zian and said, You do whatever she tells you to do. If you're not her dog, then what are you? Nie Tian, it's fine if you don't dare to accept the challenge, but why insult Senior Li? Luo Zian's beautiful eyes flickered and said, Senior Li challenged you because he thinks highly of you. If you don't dare to accept the challenge, just say so. I believe that Senior Li won't force you. A flat and cold voice sounded, but it seemed overbearing. Luo Zian, if I don't accept the challenge, won't you be very disappointed? Nie Tian faintly smiled, looking at Luo Xian with intense contempt. Luo Xian, this woman, was cold and vicious, completely manipulating the people around her like chess pieces. In particular, Li Liang, who had some strength and was full of himself, was the easiest to be manipulated. Luo Xian could even give up on her former teacher Liu. Why would she care about a mere Li Liang? Unfortunately, Li Liang couldn't see this and thought that Luo Xian was giving him a chance by asking him to fight. Nie Tian, do you dare to accept the challenge or not? Li Liang seemed to have lost his patience and shouted in a low, cold voice. I accept, of course I accept. Nie Tian faintly smiled. He didn't put Li Liang in his eyes at all. With Nie Tian's current strength, he wasn't even afraid of a peak high god expert. So why would he be afraid of a mid-stage high god like Li Liang? Liu quietly watched from the side. Of course, he wouldn't stop them. He also wanted to see how strong Nie Tian was now. Very good. Hearing Nie Tian's reply, Li Liang couldn't help but be overjoyed. He sneered and leaped thousands of meters into the sky. He looked down at Nie Tian and proudly said, Nie Tian, I, Li Liang, only need one move to defeat you. Nie Tian looked up at Li Liang in the sky and sneered. He then said to Luo Xian, do you think Li Liang can test my strength? Cut the crap. If you're really not afraid, then go all out and fight with senior brother Li. Luo Xian said coldly. Her aura was cold and murderous, as if she was an iceberg, causing others to feel a bone-chilling coldness. She didn't care about Li Liang's fate at all, and it seemed as if the latter was even inferior to a dog in her eyes. Luo Xian, you're still so cold. Nie Tian let out a sigh. Then he stomped his feet and shot up into the sky, facing Li Liang in a domineering manner. Everyone looked at the sky and couldn't help but feel nervous. Their eyes were burning and trembling. Nie Tian, I didn't expect you to accept my challenge. Li Liang was much calmer now. He stared at Nie Tian with a pair of vicious eyes and said in a deep voice, You'll know soon enough that this is the stupidest decision you've ever made in your life. Nie Tian's acceptance of the challenge had indeed surprised Li Liang. Nie Tian had Yang Zhongxiu by his side. Even if he didn't accept the challenge, Li Liang couldn't do anything. But once Nie Tian accepted the challenge, his life or death would be up to the heavens. You think this is a good opportunity? Nie Tianling laughed and said, Do you really think Luo Xian is giving you a chance? You don't even know what kind of person Luo Xian is. I dare say that in her heart, you're inferior to a dog. Bullshit. Li Liang was infuriated by Nie Tian's words. His aura rose and he roared, You're just jealous of junior sister Xian's attitude towards me. I know you haven't given up on junior sister Xian, but let me tell you, junior sister Xian is a genius, and you're just an ant. You'll never be able to move her heart. Ridiculous. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth curled up. He looked at Li Liang like he was looking at an idiot. No matter what, Li Liang was someone who had lived for more than 1,000 years. He didn't have the slightest bit of insight. It could only be said that he had lived these 1,000 years like a dog. Nie Tian, I'll take your life with one move. Li Liang shouted coldly. His entire body's aura surged violently, like a vast ocean being released. The entire sky became turbulent. He was eager to show off in front of Luo Xian, so of course he would take this opportunity to kill Nie Tian. Li Liang is so strong. The crowd below felt Li Liang's aura and couldn't help but be moved. Li Liang is indeed worthy of being the former leader of Low God forces. Although he only possesses mid-stage high god strength, his aura isn't any weaker than a late-stage high god or even an apex high god. Liu looked at Li Liang with scorching eyes, and a trace of delight could be seen in his eyes. If Li Liang really killed Nie Tian, it would be a pleasant surprise. Luo Xian's eyes flickered as though she was looking forward to something. High up in the sky, Nie Tian looked at Li Liang with eyes as calm as water. He had indeed somewhat underestimated Li Liang. The latter's strength was really strong. Even if he was slightly inferior to Wang Lang, the leader of the Green Wolf Bastion, he wasn't far off. Li Liang was once the leader of the lesser gods. His talent was top-notch in the Divine Realm verse. Naturally, his battle strength wouldn't be weak. Die! At that moment, Li Liang let out a furious roar. His figure flashed, and he suddenly thrust his palm out. Boundless palm force surged out, filling the sky with countless palm shadows, which pressed down towards Nie Tian in a formidable manner. Rumble! The palm shadows that filled the sky formed a huge net that covered the sky and pressed down on Nie Tian. The space within 10,000 meters was pulled taut as though it was about to collapse. Facing Li Liang's palm attack, Nie Tian cold spat out two words with extreme contempt. Fool! Li Liang was definitely afraid that Nie Tian would dodge and didn't dare to face him head-on. Therefore, he used such a huge move so that Nie Tian wouldn't be able to dodge. Unfortunately, the power of such a huge move was greatly dispersed and thus greatly weakened. Nie Tian originally planned to use the Forbidden Starry River, but now it seemed that there was no need for it. Astral Soul Divine Armor, activate. In the next moment, Nie Tian let out a low roar. Astral Soul wings appeared on his back. Astral Soul armor enveloped his entire body. Astral Soul shield also appeared, and Astral Soul flame transformed into a ball of flames that surged on the heaven-severing slash. Prideful Sky, 3 absolutes, peerless sword soul. Nie Tian's gaze flickered. His silhouette flickered and his wings flapped violently. His entire person was like an arrow that left the bow as he pierced out with his sword. A surging sword intent gushed out and the sword light shot out tens of thousands of meters away. A gigantic sword shadow appeared in the air. Boom! The sword shadow was extremely sharp, and terrifying astral soul flame surged within it. It directly broke through the palm shadows that filled the sky and rushed towards Li Liang. In an instant, Li Liang felt that something was amiss. He wanted to act again, but it was already too late. Pong! A muffled sound rang out as Li Liang's silhouette was directly flung out like a gigantic boulder, smashing heavily onto the ground. The palm shadows that filled the sky disappeared, leaving only a silver-haired silhouette standing in the air like a peerless sword god, disdainfully looking down on everything. The sudden scene caused the gazes of everyone to tremble as their expressions instantly turned sluggish. Chapter 1585. The scene was deathly silent. Countless gazes were locked onto Nie Tian, shocked to the extreme. Li Liang, a mid-stage high god, was defeated miserably by Nie Tian with one sword strike. This was too strange. One must know that there was a whole realm difference between the two. This guy is so scary. After a long time, someone finally reacted and gasped. His eyes were still trembling. Lai was shocked. When he reacted, his expression was very ugly. He didn't expect that Nie Tian's strength was actually so strong to such an extent. He could jump a realm and defeat Li Liang in one move. Idiot! On the other side, Luo Xian's beautiful face revealed deep anger. Cold words were spat out from the corner of her mouth. She was obviously talking about Li Liang. The reason why Nie Tian could defeat Li Liang in one move was partly because he was strong and partly because Li Liang was too stupid. Li Liang thought that Nie Tian didn't dare to fight head-on, so he dispersed his attack. This allowed Nie Tian to take advantage of the loophole. If not for that, it wouldn't be easy for Nie Tian to defeat Li Liang. You? At this time, a figure stood up in the distance. It was Li Liang. He was already dripping with blood, and no longer human shape could be seen. However, he was still alive. Li Liang struggled to take a few steps forward. He looked at Nie Tian with trembling eyes. His expression was incomparably terrified. He said in a trembling voice, "Your strength. Why are you so strong?" He couldn't understand how a dignified mid-stage high god like him could lose to a mid-stage mid-god. "It's not because I'm strong, but because you're too stupid," Nie Tianling replied coldly and didn't look at Li Liang again. Li Liang was stunned on the spot. His mouth was wide open, but no sound came out. He turned to look at Luo Xian. Unfortunately, the latter didn't even look at him. Luo Xian naturally couldn't be bothered with a useless dog. When Liu saw this scene, he couldn't help but laugh. The current Li Liang was so similar to him back then. They were both abandoned by Luo Xian. Liu waved his hand and let people help Li Liang away. Luo Xian betrayed Liu, but the latter still wanted to stand together with her. Of course, there was a reason. Luo Xian was no longer a member of the cloud-splitting divine palace, but a member of the Thousand Feathers Tower. Luo Xian now has a new teacher, and that is the Tower Master of Thousand Feather Tower. Currently, Luo Xian was the focus of Thousand Feathers Tower's nurturing. Although Lai Yu was still the cloud-splitting palace lord, the current cloud-splitting palace was already controlled by Qinyu Lu. Lai Yu's position as the palace lord only existed in name. Nie Tian had guessed correctly once again. The cloud-shattering divine palace had become a vassal force of the Thousand Feathers Tower. Luo Xian, your dog is lost. Do you want to test my strength personally? Nie Tian's figure descended and landed beside Luo Xian. He smiled faintly, full of provocation. Nie Tian, there will definitely be a battle between us, but not now, said Luo Xian solemnly. She then turned around and left the forbidden area. Lai Yu took a deep look at Nie Tian. His eyes were surging with strong fear. Of course, he didn't dare to make a move. He could only leave the forbidden area with his subordinates. Luo Xian, you better behave yourself. I won't be lenient. Nie Tian looked at Luo Xian's back and said cold in his heart. There would be a battle of life and death between him and Luo Xian. Previously, Luo Xian was saved by Heya. Next time, she wouldn't be so lucky. Nie Tian, there's something going on between you and this Thousand Clouds dark body, right? At this time, Fat Cat's voice was heard. She was actually teasing him. That's in the past. Now, there's only hatred between us. Nie Tian smiled faintly and didn't explain too much. The people of the cloud-shattering divine palace retreated out of the forbidden area. Nie Tian also let the others disperse. Next, they had to wait for the people of the other 3 divine palaces to arrive. 5 days later, Nie Tian walked out of a valley. His aura had increased slightly. These days, he had been cultivating hard. However, his strength had increased very slowly. His strength had increased too much previously. It was impossible to maintain this speed. Otherwise, it would be too terrifying. Lord Nie Tian, the people of the 4 divine palaces have arrived. Just as they walked out of the valley, Yang Zhongqiu's figure appeared and said to Nie Tian in a deep voice. All right. Nie Tian smiled faintly and walked out of the forbidden area with Yang Zhongqiu and the others. From afar, Nie Tian saw a large group of people gathered outside the forbidden area. They were the people of the 4 divine palaces. Nie Tian, outside the forbidden area, Qi Yefeng saw Nie Tian's figure. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. A hint of passion flashed in his eyes. Previously, when Nie Tian appeared in the Scarlet Moon Mountain Range, the people of the Red Moon Divine Palace didn't stop him. Instead, they suffered heavy casualties. Qi Yefeng didn't expect that Nie Tian would take the initiative to contact him. Sect Masters, sorry to keep you waiting, Nie Tian said with a faint smile as he walked up to them in a leisurely manner, his face expressionless. It's really this kid. When the Heaven Sword Palace Master and the Medicine King Palace Master saw Nie Tian's figure, they couldn't help but be stunned. They really didn't expect that Nie Tian, who was like a small shrimp not long ago, would actually be related to the elders of the Holy Parliament. Are the Palace Masters surprised? Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, It seems that the Origin Stone mineral lode is quite attractive. The Palace Masters have come personally. Nie Tian, is there really an Origin Stone mineral lode here? The Heaven Sword Palace Master obviously didn't believe Nie Tian. He asked in a deep voice with a sharp gaze. Heaven Sword Palace Master can choose not to believe me, but you should believe Palace Master Lai Yun. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, Palace Master Lai Yun, please bring them in. Lai Yu frowned. He was not used to Nie Tian giving him orders directly, but he still obeyed the order. He turned around and said to the Heaven Sword Palace Master and the others, Everyone, follow me. The Palace Masters were all Lord-level experts, so they could obviously sense the existence of the killing formation in the Forbidden Ground. They followed behind Palace Master Lai Yun very carefully. The 4 Palace Masters each brought a few cultivators in, while the others could only stay outside the Forbidden Ground. Nie Tian, long time no see. Qi Yefeng entered the Forbidden Ground and came to Nie Tian's side. He smiled faintly as if nothing had happened. "Palace Master, I heard that you wanted to see me, so I took the initiative to call you here. I hope you don't mind." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said calmly. Until now, Nie Tian still did not know Qi Yefeng's identity. This person's background seemed to be very complicated. The other palace masters saw that the relationship between Nie Tian and Qi Yefeng seemed to be a little strange. They were all stunned, but they did not care too much. Nie Tian introduced Yang Zhongxiu, then said, "Elder Yang has given me full authority over the cooperation. Let's find a place to talk." Then, the group walked into the forbidden ground. Nie Tian. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded. She seemed to be very nervous. "What's wrong?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he asked. "There's something strange about the person beside you," Fat Cat said in a deep voice. She was actually very serious. "Qi Yefeng." Nie Tian was stunned. He then looked at Qi Yefeng and asked, "What's wrong with him?" "This person has innate dragon meridians." Fat Cat frowned, and her eyes became strange. Innate dragon meridians. Upon hearing these words, Nie Tian's expression abruptly changed. 3 words involuntarily appeared in his mind. Fatalist. Innate dragon meridians were the symbol of a destined one. Chapter 1586. Innate dragon vein. Nie Tian was shocked. After a few seconds, he calmed down and asked, "Fat, did you see wrongly? If Qi Yefeng is an innate dragon vein, why can't I sense it?" Nie Tian knew that Fat Cat's perception was very strong, but Qi Yefeng's innate dragon vein made him very suspicious. His perception was also very strong, and as someone with the sovereign dragon vein, his perception of dragon veins was even stronger. If Qi Yefeng was really an innate dragon vein, Nie Tian wouldn't be able to sense it. "I can't be wrong." Fat Cat calmed down and laughed weirdly. "There's a restriction on this guy's dragon vein that can perfectly suppress the aura of the dragon vein. Even if you have a sovereign dragon vein, you still can't sense the aura of an innate dragon vein." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and the way he looked at Qi Yefeng couldn't help but change. Previously, he was suspicious of Qi Yefeng's identity, but he never thought that Qi Yefeng would be a destined one. Nie Tian, people with innate dragon vein have a special sense of the 9 dragons earth vein. You must be careful of this guy. Fat Cat became slightly more serious and reminded Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded slightly and was even more wary of Qi Yefeng. He was even more worried that Qi Yefeng would recognize at a glance that the so-called Mother Earth Stone mine was actually the 9 dragons earth vein. Nie Tian even suspected that Qi Yefeng wanted the Mother Earth Stone because of the 9 dragons earth vein. After a while, the group came to a valley. Nie Tian, just say it. How do we cooperate next? Heaven Sword Palace Master Jianwei didn't waste any time and said directly. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He didn't intend to waste any more time, and thus said, "Each of the 4 divine palaces can choose 4 people to go into the mine. If the mine is thoroughly explored and mined, each of the 4 divine palaces will get 10% of the mine. What do you think?" 10%? Jianwei's eyes narrowed slightly. Then he smiled and said, "The 4 palaces will each get 10%. Doesn't that mean the remaining 60% will be yours?" As soon as Nie Tian came up, he opened his mouth like a lion and swallowed more than half by himself. This made Jianwei very unhappy. "Heaven Sword Palace Master, you can't say that." Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "Elder Yang's appearance here represents the Holy Parliament. Of the 60%, 50% belongs to the Holy Parliament. I can only get 10%. Since Nie Tian had borrowed the Holy Parliament's name, he would borrow it to the end. This way, the people of the 4 divine palaces would also have some fear. Yang Zhongxiu's identity as an elder was real, but he didn't come on behalf of the Holy Council. Instead, he was kidnapped by Nie Tian. Nie Tian's demand for such an exorbitant price was, on one hand, to intimidate the people of the 4 divine palaces, and on the other hand, to make them more convinced that Yang Zhongxiu represented the Holy Parliament. If Nie Tian was afraid of the slightest thing, it would be easier for him to give himself away. "Palace Masters, do you agree?" Tian smiled faintly as his eyes wandered around the four palace masters. I agree. Unexpectedly, the palace master of the Medicine King Palace, Yao Chun, was the first to agree. Moreover, he was very straightforward and said, Lord Tian, I hope our cooperation will go smoothly. The other three palace masters were stunned. They clearly didn't expect Yao Chun to be the first to agree. Moreover, Yao Chun had called Tian Lord. This meant that he had acknowledged Tian's leading role in this cooperation. I also agree. Qi Yifeng thought for a moment and nodded. He looked at Tian and smiled strangely. Liu turned around and looked at Luo Zian. The latter nodded lightly. He understood and also agreed. Jian Weia saw that the other three palace masters had agreed and could only nod. Next, the four palace masters each chose a person to enter the 9 dragons' earth vein. Apart from the four palace masters, the four divine palaces each chose an inner elder who was at the early stage of Overgod. The rest of the people were relatively young martial artists. Of course, Luo Zian was among the 4 people from the cloud splitting divine palace. Of course, she wouldn't miss this opportunity. On the other hand, Tian brought everyone with him. Apart from him, Chen Wuqing, Xiao, Yi, Yin Tian, and Yang Zhongxiu all entered the 9 dragons' earth vein. Soon, everyone arrived at the entrance of the abyss of the earth vein. This is the origin stone mine. Jian Weia and Yao Chun couldn't help but exclaim when they saw the strange scene in front of them. What a powerful force! The others were also surprised. This was the most magical scene they had ever seen in their lives. As Liu and the others had already seen the 9 dragons' earth vein, their reactions were relatively calm. However, Qi Yifeng's reaction caught Tian's attention. Qi Yifeng looked at the 9 dragons' earth vein and his eyes trembled uncontrollably. His entire body trembled as well. Clearly, he was so excited that he couldn't control himself. Palace Master Qi Yifeng, are you all right? Liu glanced at Qi Yifeng and sneered. The scene in front of them was indeed magical, but Qi Yifeng's reaction was a little too much. The others also looked at Qi Yifeng with disdain. Qi Yifeng was a palace master after all, but his reaction was like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. However, Tian saw Qi Yifeng's reaction as a very terrifying reaction. He guessed that Qi Yifeng must have already seen that the abyss in front of them was not some origin stone mine, but the 9 dragons' earth vein. Tian, the dragon vein restriction in his body, is reacting. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was suddenly heard. She was actually a little panicked. Tian narrowed his eyes and enveloped it with his divine sense. He immediately sensed that there was indeed a terrifying restriction surging in Qi Yifeng's body, as though it was slowly being broken. However, Tian still didn't feel the aura of the innate dragon vein. It seemed that this restriction was very terrifying, as it concealed the aura of the dragon vein perfectly. Perhaps only a monster like Fat Cat could sense the existence of the innate dragon vein. Fat, why did his dragon vein restriction suddenly become unstable? Tian became cold and asked solemnly. The 9 dragons' earth vein contains a strong origin stone energy, which is a power that is close to the power of origin. It has a strong impact on the restriction. Fat Cat nodded slightly and explained, if Qi Yifeng enters the 9 dragons' earth vein, I'm afraid his dragon vein restriction will be unsealed immediately. Dragon vein restriction unsealed. Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and a trace of horror appeared on his face. He did not know whether Qi Yifeng's dragon vein restriction had been forcefully left behind or left behind willingly to suppress the aura of the innate dragon vein. However, he knew that once the restriction was unsealed, Qi Yifeng's strength would probably skyrocket. Right now, Qi Yifeng was a mid-overgod. If the restriction was unsealed, he would probably directly reach the peak of Overgod. He might even have the chance to reach the Supreme Realm. Tian knew very little about Qi Yifeng, but he was very sure that the latter was an extremely cruel person. The way he killed Long Wei was a good example. If Qi Yifeng's dragon vein restriction was unsealed, It would be terrible if he started a massacre. Right now, Tian rather regretted letting Chi Yefeng come here. Chapter 1587. Everyone, the mineral vein is extremely dangerous. Before we enter the mineral vein, we must be united. Tian became cold and glanced at everyone. Then, he took a step forward and floated above the abyss. Everyone walked over, keeping a distance of a few meters from each other, not getting too close to each other. Let's go. Tian nodded and signaled Lai Yu and the others to go first. Lai Yu didn't stand on ceremony and led the three from Cloud, splitting Divine Palace, to dive into the abyss. Tian signaled Chun Wuqing to protect the others while he followed closely behind Lai Yu and the others. Following Lai Yu's attack, Tian felt the pressure in the space was relieved. As Tian went down, he sensed the fluctuation of aura in Chi Yefeng's body. He realized that as they went deeper into the earth vein, the dragon vein seal in Chi Yefeng's body became more active. It seemed like it was going to be unsealed soon. Tian, don't pay attention to that guy for now. His dragon vein restrictions will definitely be lifted. You won't be able to stop it. The little fat cat's voice rang out, reminding Tian. Tian nodded and focused on surroundings. Big brother Tian, we're almost at the bottom of the abyss. I'm afraid those fire bats are going to appear. At this moment, Yin Tian came to Tian's side and whispered, "Don't take out the battle cloud, divine robe. Let them deal with the Darkwing Firebat." Tian knew what Yin Tian was thinking and reminded him not to be impulsive. The battle cloud divine robe could deal with the Darkwing Firebat effectively. However, the divine robe was the treasure of the Yun family. If it was taken out now, it would definitely attract covetous eyes. The Darkwing Firebat was very powerful. However, there were 8 overgod level experts around Tian's group. It was more than enough to deal with the Darkwing Firebat. Actually, Tian knew that there were 9 overgod level experts around him. There was another person lurking around Chi Yefeng. Chi Gui? Fat Cat had already discovered Chi Gui's existence, and Tian had also sensed it. He just didn't say anything. Everyone be careful. At this moment, Tian sensed something and suddenly roared to warn everyone. Boom! Before his voice faded away, a large amount of fire suddenly surged on the stone walls of the abyss. In an instant, it directly spread into a sea of fire. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Immediately, countless Darkwing Firebats madly rushed over and attacked the crowd. The flames of the Firebats were like countless sharp blades that covered the sky and pressed down on the crowd. What the hell is this? Lai Yu, who was right at the front, frowned and roared furiously as he slapped out with his palm. The enormous force of the palm roiled like the sea and actually forcefully dispersed the swarm of Firebats. A Lord God-level expert is indeed powerful. Tian couldn't help but laugh bitterly when he saw Lai Yu directly disperse the group of Firebats with a single palm strike. He had already experienced the might of the Darkwing Firebat. Even if he attacked it with all his might, he would not be able to shake it. Yet, Lai Yu merely casually threw out a palm, and a vast and mighty group of Firebats directly collapsed. This kind of strength was shocking. Lai Yu was a peak Lord-level figure and a martial artist on the Divine Lord ranking list of the 9 major domains. Of course, he was very strong. However, his strength was far inferior compared to Tian's 6th uncle, the strongest Lord Niefeiyu. Niefeiyu was a Lord expert who could contend with a supreme god. How could Lai Yu be compared to him? Squeak, squeak, squeak. The group of Firebats was very ferocious. After being dispersed by a palm strike, they pressed over again and let out ear-piercing strange cries in the air, appearing extremely mournful and eerie. Tian and the others were in a very good position. Lai Yu was blocking below, and Jian Wuya and the others were above. It was very safe. Damn strange birds, get lost for this palace lord. Jian Wuya was a little irritable and directly slashed out with his sword. An enormous sword shadow soared into the sky. The Darkwing Firebats that pressed over from above died miserably under the terrifying sword intent and directly collapsed. Sword's essence martial artist. When Yetian saw this scene, his brows sank slightly and immediately reacted. Jianhuia was actually a swordsman at the Sword's Essence realm. The God realm Sword Dao had 6 major realms: Sword Mark, Sword Vein, Sword Bone, Sword Essence, Sword Forgetting Self, and Sword and Martial Unity. The improvement of each realm was a qualitative improvement for a swordsman. Nietian was currently at the Sword Vein realm, which was 2 major realms lower than Jianhuia. It was not an exaggeration to say that even if the current Jianhuia only had the strength of a mid-god, relying on the strength of Sword Dao, it was enough to kill Nietian in one move. Jianhuia's battle prowess is not below Lai Yu. Nietian looked at Jianhuia and said solemnly in his heart, "The palace lords of the 12 shrines were not simple." Medicine King Palace Lord Yao Chun appeared to be more cunning. He always followed beside Nietian and the others and did not have the intention to make a move. Although the Darkwing Fire Bats were powerful, Lai Yu and Jianhuia were enough to deal with them. Under the escort of Lai Yu and Jianhuia, everyone continued to descend. It's already more than 10,000 meters deep. Have we not reached the bottom of the abyss yet? Nietian said in his heart. He then spread out his divine sense and sensed everything below. With the eyes of Starry activated, Nietian's vision was very clear. He could see thousands of meters below. We're almost there. Nietian looked at the abyss below and could faintly see the bottom. The corner of his mouth could not help but curl into a faint smile. At this moment, the figure of the Darkwing Firebat had gradually gone far away and did not chase after them. Everyone let out a long breath of turbid air. Their faces were filled with excitement. After a moment, everyone finally descended to the bottom and touched solid ground. What a dense Mother Earth essence energy! Just as they descended, Yao Chan sensed the aura in the surrounding space and could not help but exclaim, "This is all Mother Earth essence stones." Almost at the same time, Yang Zhongqiu's exclamation rang out. He looked at the huge rocks around him with burning eyes and was extremely excited. This place seemed to be a huge cave. The stone walls were actually all Mother Earth essence stones. It was as huge as a mountain. It was hard to imagine how much Mother Earth essence energy was contained in such a huge Mother Earth essence stone. Nietian glanced around, and to his surprise, discovered that there was a faint light in this place. He was very curious. This was 10,000 meters deep underground. Where did the light come from? The underground pressure here was also very weak. It was not as strong as Nietian had imagined. Everything seemed to be very strange. At this moment, everyone was very excited. Just the Mother Earth essence stones in front of them made this trip worth it. Boom! However, at this moment, the ground suddenly shook violently. The entire ground seemed to be on the verge of collapse. What's going on? Someone cried out in panic, extremely flustered. Nietian held his breath and concentrated. He concentrated his divine sense and sensed everything around him. Boom! Immediately after, there was another violent shaking. The feeling of the shaking was extremely obvious. Nietian, it's underground. The next moment, Fat Cat's panic cry rang out and reminded Nietian. Nietian was stunned. Then he activated the holographic Divine Prince and sensed the underground. In an instant, he suddenly felt that there seemed to be a terrifying force rushing towards the surface from underground. Be careful! Nietian's eyes suddenly narrowed. Then he exclaimed, Chapter 1588. Rumble. In the underground abyss, a terrifying force suddenly erupted and the ground cracked. Immediately after, a sharp claw that was tens of meters long drilled out of the ground. It was so sharp that it seemed as though it could tear everything apart. When the sharp claw appeared, it clawed at one of the martial artists. The space seemed as though it was about to be torn apart. Puff! That martial artist didn't even have time to react. He was directly clamped by the sharp claw and turned into a bloody mess. The tragic and bloody scene stunned everyone, and their expressions became sluggish. Leave this place. Nietian was the first to react. He shouted and asked Chen Wuqing and the others to leave first. The martial artist who died tragically was from the shattering Cloud Divine Palace. He had the strength of a mid-stage high god. He didn't have any strength to resist and died tragically in an instant. Even his godhead was gone. Nyation didn't know what the giant claw that appeared from underground was, but he knew that it was extremely terrifying. The others also reacted at this moment and hurriedly ran forward in a panic. The space in front of Nyation and the others was very spacious. The passageway in front of them was thousands of meters wide. It was like a huge underground palace. The crowd ran wildly in panic and didn't dare to turn their heads back. However, the sharp claw didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. It was moving in extremely high speed underground. Wherever the sharp claw passed, the ground would be torn apart. Even the source earth stones were shattered by the impact. The source earth energy was released, and the aura was extremely strong. The crowd's speed was very fast. Unfortunately, the underground monster's speed was even faster. In the blink of an eye, it had caught up with them. The last martial artist was chased by the sharp claw. He wanted to turn around and attack, but he was swept by a ray of cold light and his body was cut into two. What the hell is this? Nyation roared in his heart, and his eyes revealed a huge, killing intent. Ah! At this moment, another martial artist screamed and died tragically under the sharp claw. In the blink of an eye, 3 people died in the hands of the underground monster. Damn it, this palace master wants to see just what kind of thing you are. That person who died tragically was a member of the Heaven Sword Divine Palace. When Jian Wuya saw that, he actually roared in anger. His silhouette turned sluggish, and after that, he took out his boundless sword. A terrifying sword intent erupted forth, condensing into a sharp sword shadow that shot towards that sharp claw. Nyation stopped. He wanted to see if Jian Wuya's sword could stop the monster underground. Boom! The claw from the ground suddenly shot out. It was not afraid of Jian Wuya's sword at all. Boom! An explosive sound rang out, and the sharp sword shadow actually collapsed, while the sharp claw only lost a few scales. What a powerful strength! Seeing this, Nyation couldn't help but frown. This underground monster was too strong. Jian Wuya's all-out attack had only lost a few scales. After all, Jian Wuya was an over-god who wielded the essence of the sword. He could easily destroy a mountain with a single strike. Boom! Jian Wuya's attack didn't injure the underground monster. Instead, it angered it. The sharp claw broke out of the ground, and then a huge forearm covered with thorns and scales appeared. It was like a huge stone pillar, and the ground immediately cracked. Damn it! When Jian Wuya saw that, he couldn't help but roar. The killing intent in his eyes was even more intense. He shouted loudly, "Palace Master Lai Yun, let's attack together and kill this monster." When Lai Yu heard Jian Wuya's yell, his figure turned sluggish and actually really stopped. Boom! The next moment, a huge figure drilled out of the ground, and the complete figure was finally revealed. It was a huge black beast covered with huge scales. When everyone saw the huge beast appear, they couldn't help but gasp. The shock in their hearts was written on their faces. Nyation looked at the huge beast in front of him, and his eyes narrowed. This huge beast was somewhat similar to the Earth Monitor lizard he had seen before, but its body was slender and it had 2 horns on its head. It was very similar to a divine dragon. Is this a dragon? Someone looked at the huge beast and couldn't help but exclaim. His voice became shrill. The divine dragon clan was extinct in the ancient times. Divine dragons only lived in legends, and no one had ever seen one. But this big guy in front of him looked very similar to a divine dragon, just a little ugly. Nyation, this is an earth dragon. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded, and it was much calmer. An earth dragon? Nyation was stunned. Fat Cat's voice was deep, and she explained, an earth dragon is also a divine dragon clan, but it's a low-level dragon clan. It's not very strong. An adult earth dragon only has the strength of an early-stage overgod. Nyation's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't expect that the huge beast in front of him was actually a dragon. Although an earth dragon was only a low-level dragon clan, it was still a real dragon clan. In fact, up until now, Nyation had never seen a real divine dragon. She was a dragon soul, and the Devil World Dragon was a divine dragon subspecies. Perhaps the dragon corpse in the hanging coffin wasn't alive, so they couldn't be considered real divine dragons. But the earth dragon in front of him was a real divine dragon. The divine dragon clan had long been extinct. Because earth dragons lived underground, they had escaped the fate of extinction. Moo! At this time, the earth dragon suddenly roared, and it was very different from the roar of a dragon. It sounded more like a bull python. It doesn't matter if it's a dragon or not. Just kill it. Jianwuya was very strong. He roared, and his eyes surged with strong killing intent. At this time, the earth dragon's huge body suddenly moved, and it directly rushed towards them. A violent aura rolled up a terrible wave of air. And yet Tian and the others couldn't bear the wave of air, and they were forced to retreat. Evil creature, I'll dominate you. Jianwuya was incomparably valiant. He roared, and his figure moved. A sharp sword light surged on the Wuya sword. At this moment, a terrible sword intent was released from his blood and marrow. The essence of the sword was a swordsman. Sword intent and sword soul were integrated into the bone marrow, and they were greatly improved. His whole body was like a sharp sword. Boom! A terrible sword shadow whistled out, and it actually bombarded the earth dragon's head. With a muffled explosion, a huge bloody hole dozens of meters wide appeared on the earth dragon's head. Blood immediately gushed out like a fountain. What divine dragon? It's just SOSO. Jianwuya couldn't help but laugh wildly. He was very arrogant. However, the next moment his laughter stopped. The earth dragon's huge head shook, and the bloody hole on its head actually recovered in an instant. Even the scales on its head grew out again. Divine dragon's body. Tian suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed. According to the legend, the divine dragon clan's body was almost indestructible. The divine dragon clan was strong and domineering because the dragon's body was strong, stronger than any armor. When the divine dragon clan's body was seriously injured, any wound could quickly heal. The divine dragon clan only had one weakness, and that was the dragon heart. The dragon heart was the gathering place of the divine dragon's dragon chi and blood essence. Once it was destroyed, the divine dragon's body could no longer heal. However, the divine dragon's dragon heart was the hardest scale on its body. It was called the dragon's reverse scale. Chapter 1589. When Jianwuya saw the wound on the earth dragon's head heal instantly, he couldn't help but tremble and his whole body froze. He obviously didn't expect the earth dragon's recovery ability to be so strong that it could heal itself instantly. Is this really a divine dragon? Liu was also stunned for a moment and couldn't help but exclaim. Such a strong recovery ability easily made people think of a divine dragon. Oh my god, it's really a divine dragon. Someone shouted in horror, almost scared out of his wits. Moo! At this moment, the earth dragon suddenly roared, and then its huge body leaped up. Its dragon claws clawed down in midair, and a sharp cold light flashed as it attacked Jianwuya. Watch out! Tian shouted when he saw this, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. Jianwuya was in a daze at this moment, but he suddenly reacted and directly stabbed out with his sword. Relying on the rebound force of the sword shadow, he barely avoided the fatal attack of the earth dragon. However, his arm was cut by the cold light, and blood flowed out. The wound of the divine dragon seeped in powerful dragon chi. Even a lord-level expert would need some time to recover. Palace Master Lian, are you just standing there and watching the show? Jianwuya retreated hundreds of meters, then looked at Liu and roared in a deep voice. Liu had been watching the show from beginning to end, as if he didn't even intend to make a move. How could Jianwuya not be angry? If Liu had made a move just now, Jianwuya wouldn't have been injured. However, the god palaces were suspicious of each other, and it was difficult for them to work together. Liu looked at Jianwuya with a gloomy gaze, but he didn't say anything. At this moment, Tian's voice sounded, and he shouted, "For palace masters, this is an earth dragon, an inferior dragon of the divine dragon clan. Its strength is comparable to an early-stage paramount god expert. I hope you can work together Otherwise, it will be difficult for everyone to leave here alive. At this moment, Nietion's voice sounded, and he shouted in a deep voice. Everyone was stunned at first, and then the atmosphere became a little strange. Good, let's attack together. The next moment, a voice sounded, and then a figure appeared next to Nietion. It was Yao Chun. Many thanks. Nietion's gaze hardened. He glanced at Yao Chun beside him and expressed his thanks. This was the second time Yao Chun had responded to Nietion. Nietion remembered that he had never interacted with Yao Chun. He had even killed people from the Divine Medicine King Palace. Why was this person helping him? At this time, Nietion did not have time to think too much and temporarily suppressed the doubts in his heart. At this moment, finding a way to kill the Earth Dragon was the top priority. The four palace masters looked at each other and understood each other's intentions. They nodded at the same time and roared in unison, "Move!" Jian Wuya was the most ferocious and was the first to attack. The boundless sword pierced through the air. This time, the sky was filled with sword images that linked together, forming a huge sword net that enveloped the Earth Dragon. Sovereign laws. Nietion saw an extremely profound power surge through the sword net. It was actually similar to some kind of power of laws. It was extremely terrifying, and he could not help but understand that this was the power of laws of overgods. Jian Wuya was a late overgod. Coupled with his essence of sword, the power of overgod laws had fused with his sword intent. It was extremely terrifying. Boom! The Earth Dragon leapt up and swung down with its huge claws. The surroundings shook, but its body was immediately enveloped by the sword net. It was actually temporarily restrained. A good chance. Liu bellowed out when he saw this. He moved, and a pair of black wings actually appeared on his back. They were 1,000 meters wide when unfurled, shining with strange, black flames. Dark feather flames kill. Liu folded his wings, and a ball of black flame shot out. It struck the Earth Dragon's chest. Obviously, he knew that the reverse scale on the Earth Dragon's chest was its weakness. Moo! The Earth Dragon seemed to sense danger at that moment. It roared out furiously, and its huge body began to shake. It actually wanted to break free from the sword net. At that moment of danger, a strange ball of light appeared and surged into the sword net, immediately strengthening it. A barrier. Nietion was stunned when he saw this. He then looked at Yao Chun. It was the latter who had released a barrier to strengthen the restraining power of Jian Wuya's sword net. Kaboom! In the next moment, the black flames directly bombarded the Earth Dragon's heart-protecting dragon scale. With a loud explosion, a glaring crack appeared on the huge heart-protecting dragon scale. Crimson Moon's hand. At that moment, Qi Yefeng, who had not done anything all this time, finally took action. He directly struck out with his palm, and a huge blood-red hand appeared in the air, directly grabbing at the Earth Dragon's chest. Bang! The crimson hand fell immediately, directly shattering the dragon scale before deeply embedding itself into the Earth Dragon's chest. This! Everyone could not help but be stunned when they saw this. They all gasped. They never thought that Qi Yefeng's strength would be so terrifying. Nietion, this guy wants to snatch the dragon heart. Just then, Little Fat Cat's voice suddenly rang out as it cried out in alarm. Dragon heart. Nietion was stunned, but he immediately reacted. Qi Yefeng shattered the Earth Dragon scale with one palm. Obviously, he wanted to directly take out the dragon heart. The dragon heart was the place where all the dragon chi and blood essence of the divine dragon gathered. The power contained in it was unimaginable. Nietion reacted, but he was stunned because his strength was too weak. Compared to the four palace masters, he was not at the same level at all. Even though he knew that Qi Yefeng wanted to snatch the dragon heart, he could only watch helplessly. There was no way he could do anything. With Nietion's strength, trying to snatch the dragon heart from Qi Yefeng was simply courting death. Puff! At that moment, the huge, blood-red hand suddenly stretched out from the void, holding a crystal ball of light the size of a baby's fist. Dragon heart! Qi Yefeng's eyes suddenly flickered, and he exclaimed in excitement. The moment the dragon heart was taken out, The earth dragon's huge body crashed to the ground, directly turning into a pile of mud, losing all signs of life in the blink of an eye. A divine dragon was killed just like that, by taking out its heart. This is the dragon heart. Nietian looked at the crystal ball of light in midair, and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He did not expect the dragon heart to be so small, far smaller than a cultivator's godhead. He suddenly understood that the dragon heart was condensed from the divine dragon's dragon chi and blood essence, and not the divine dragon's heart. What a powerful force! The moment the dragon heart appeared, the other 3 palace masters simultaneously felt an extremely violent force spreading out, vast and boundless, spreading in the void. This force was emitted by the dragon heart. In an instant, Lai Yu, Jian Wuya, and Yao Chen's eyes turned completely red, flickering with a blazing divine light. How powerful was the power contained in the dragon heart? This was something even more terrifying than the Origin Earth primordial stone. Who wouldn't want it? Everyone, let's work together to kill the Earth Dragon. Of course, the dragon heart belongs to whoever gets it first. You guys won't snatch it from me, right? Qi Yefeng sensed that something was wrong with the gazes of Lai Yu and the others. Chapter 1590. Qi Yefeng, don't worry about the dragon's heart. Jian Wuya was extremely ferocious. With a sneer, the boundless sword suddenly pierced towards Qi Yefeng. Don't even think about it, Qi Yefeng growled. He had already obtained the dragon's heart. How could he let it go? Qi Yefeng waved his hand, and the dragon's heart flew towards him. Then, he moved, wanting to grab the dragon's heart. Qi Yefeng, you want to devour the dragon's heart with your strength? Dream on. At the same time, Lai Yu's figure also moved. The dark feather wings on his back suddenly vibrated, and 2 sharp dark feather blades appeared. Damn it! Seeing this, Qi Yefeng could not help but frown and scold. If he forcefully snatched the dragon's heart, he would definitely be injured. At that time, not only would he not be able to obtain the dragon's heart, but his life would also be in danger. Huh, the dragon's heart is mine. Lai Yu forced Qi Yefeng back. His wings vibrated, and a violent force swept out, controlling the dragon's heart. Seeing that it was about to fall into his hands, he could not help but reveal an expression of ecstasy. Bastard! Jian Wuya was very far away from Lai Yu. At this moment, he wanted to make a move, but it was too late. He could only scold in a low voice. Palace Master Lai Yun, do you think I'll give up such a good thing like the dragon's heart? At this moment, another voice rang out in an untimely manner. Soon after, Yao Chen's figure appeared. Suddenly, a cluster of strange energy surged out from his palm and whizzed out. Under the fight between the 2 forces, the dragon's heart immediately began to shake, and its direction was a little erratic. Nietian, now is the time. Make a move. Suddenly, Fat Cat's voice rang out, actually asking Nietian to make a move. Nietian was stunned, and his eyes suddenly narrowed. Fat Cat was simply crazy to ask him to make a move at this time. Snatching something from the hands of 4 overgod-level experts was no different from snatching food from a tiger's mouth. Even if Nietian obtained the dragon's heart by luck, he would at most cover his hands. How could the 4 palace masters let him have it? The dragon heart wasn't some kind of heavenly treasure that could be directly eaten. The power contained within it was terrifying to the extreme and abnormally berserk. Forget about Nietian being unable to withstand this power. Even Lai Yu and the other 3 did not dare to directly swallow the dragon heart. Otherwise, their martial bodies would definitely explode and they would die. However, just as Nietian was in a daze, Fat Cat's voice rang out again. It was very determined. Do it. Let's fight. Nietian suddenly came to a realization. Since Fat Cat asked him to take action, there must be a reason, so he might as well go all out. As he thought of this, a pair of astral soul wings appeared on Nietian's back. His entire person was akin to an arrow shot from a bow as he shot towards the heart of the dragon. Seeing the 4 palace lords fighting over the dragon's heart, the crowd was shocked. They didn't expect that another person would join the fray. It's Nietian. When Luo Xian saw that the figure was actually Nietian, her beautiful eyes flickered intensely. Her expression was clearly saying, "Is he crazy?" Nie Tian, Chun Wuqing, Yang Zhongxiu, and the rest also reacted and exclaimed in shock. Their eyes were filled with terror. Who would have thought that Nie Tian, a mere intermediate god, actually dared to covet the dragon's heart? From the point of view of everyone, Nie Tian's action was simply courting death. However, Nie Tian didn't hesitate. His eyes flickered and a huge spiritual force was released, transforming into a formless giant hand that grabbed towards the crystal ball of light. "Ant, you want to snatch the dragon's heart?" Lai Yu was stunned. He stared at Nie Tian, his eyes filled with intense, killing intent. Immediately after, he struck out with his palm, but the aura wasn't very strong. He didn't dare to kill Nie Tian, especially in front of Yang Zhongxiu. Nie Tian's wings flapped, and he retreated a few hundred meters. However, the spiritual force firmly grabbed the dragon's heart and flew towards Nie Tian. "Many thanks." Nie Tian smiled faintly. He stretched out his hand and actually managed to snatch the dragon's heart. The instant the dragon's heart entered his hand, Nie Tian felt a violent and explosive power surging through him. The dragon's heart is so powerful. No wonder it could heal the body of the earth dragon in an instant. Nie Tian couldn't help but think to himself as he recalled the scene of the earth dragon's wound healing. Bastard! The four palace lords were stunned when they saw Nie Tian snatch the dragon's heart, but they immediately roared in anger. Four lord-level powerhouses had actually let a medium god martial artist pick up the slack in the end. This in itself was a disgrace. Nie Tian, with your strength, you really shouldn't have snatched the dragon's heart. Qi Yefeng blurred into action and arrived at a location not far from Nie Tian, his eyes filled with extreme coldness. Nie Tian, hand over the dragon's heart obediently. Jian Weia also moved and arrived on the other side of Nie Tian. Lai Yu and Yao Chen also moved. The four surrounded Nie Tian. The four palace lords risked their lives to kill the earth dragon, but in the end, the dragon's heart fell into Nie Tian's hands. How could they not be angry? "Fat, what do we do now?" Nie Tian felt the aura of the four. His eyes flickered and he asked anxiously. Actually, he didn't want to snatch the dragon's heart at all. He only took action because of Fat Cat's strong request. Now that he had snatched the dragon's heart, the key was what to do next. Think of a way to give the dragon's heart TD. Fat Cat chuckled. He was actually very happy. Nie Tian was stunned. He didn't understand what Fat Cat meant. Why did I want to give the dragon's heart TD? Just do as I say. Fat Cat smiled strangely and urged. Okay. Nie Tian nodded and said, "For palace lords, you all want the dragon's heart. In the end, all four of you will be injured. Why don't you give the dragon's heart to me and avoid a fight?" Nie Tian said as he approached ED. The four palace lords followed Nie Tian carefully while guarding against each other. Nie Tian's figure slowly descended and landed beside ED. The four palace lords didn't act rashly. None of them dared to attack immediately. "Why don't we give the dragon's heart to this little brother for safekeeping?" Nie Tian smiled faintly and handed the dragon's heart to ED. ED was stunned. Then, his eyes trembled as if he felt something. He immediately took the dragon's heart. "Nie Tian, what do you want?" Jian Weia stepped forward. He had already lost his patience. If Nie Tian didn't hand over the dragon's heart, he would really attack. "I'm doing this for everyone's sake." Nie Tian smiled faintly and asked Fat Cat, "Fat, what should we do next?" "Next is much simpler." Fat Cat smiled proudly and said, "Let ED swallow the dragon's heart." Nie Tian was stunned. His expression froze. He wondered if he had misheard. The dragon's heart contained an extremely violent power. Even the four palace lords didn't dare to swallow it. How could ED swallow it? However, while Nie Tian was still in shock, ED suddenly opened his mouth and swallowed the dragon's heart. The sudden scene stunned everyone. They couldn't believe their eyes. ED swallowed the dragon's heart. "Brat, you're crazy." Lai was the first to react. He roared and his eyes trembled violently. ED swallowed the dragon's heart. This was suicide. Boom! At this moment, ED's body suddenly shook. A violent aura rushed into the sky and formed a huge dragon's shadow in the air. Chapter 1591. In an instant, everyone's gazes converged onto ED, and all of them had expressions of disbelief. Nobody could have imagined that ED would directly swallow the Earth Dragon's heart. While the crowd was still in shock, ED's body began to emit boundless draconic energy. The air around him was filled with extremely dense draconic energy. A dragon-shaped aura shot up into the sky and shook heaven and earth. "Everyone, get out of the way. This kid is going to explode." Jian Wuya came to his senses. He let out a strange cry and retreated at top speed. He thought that ED wouldn't be able to withstand the violent energy contained in the dragon heart, and that his body would explode. Everyone else also came to their senses and retreated. Tian was standing not far away, looking at ED in astonishment. He could sense that ED's aura was skyrocketing. It was his own aura, not the aura released by the dragon heart. Without a doubt, ED's strength was skyrocketing. What's going on? Tian couldn't help but gulp and murmur. Tian, just feel the condition of this kid's body, and you'll know. I made him swallow the dragon's heart. Do you think I would harm him? Little Fat Cat chuckled proudly, looking a little excited. Tian forced himself to calm down. He looked at ED with a burning gaze and sent his divine sense into it. All of a sudden, Tian sensed something, and his expression stiffened once again. He discovered that the Earth Dragon's heart had fused with ED's body, and it was a perfect fusion. How is this possible? The Earth Dragon's strength was comparable to an early-stage paramount god. The power contained in its heart was immeasurable. ED was only a mid-stage lesser god, and his martial body wasn't particularly strong. How could he withstand such enormous power and perfectly fuse the dragon heart with his martial body? Not only in Tian's opinion, but in everyone else's opinion, this was impossible. Could it be? The next moment, an idea struck Tian, and he exclaimed. Two words appeared in his mind. The demon dragon's heart. He had almost forgotten that ED possessed the demon dragon's heart. This kid has fused with the demon dragon's heart since he was very young. His martial body is far stronger than an ordinary martial artist's. Coupled with the powerful fusion power of the divine dragon's bloodline, a mere earth dragon's heart is nothing to him. Fat Cat laughed strangely, feeling very proud of himself. Only now did Tian come to his senses. He murmured in his heart, "The demon dragon's heart is a sacred object of the demon dragon race. The power contained within it is far greater than the earth dragon's heart. The dragon's heart contains dragon chi and blood essence. This kind of energy is originally compatible with the demon dragon's heart, so of course ED can absorb it." The demonic dragon clan was a superior dragon clan among the divine dragon clan. They were far more powerful than the earth dragons. ED had the devil dragon's heart in his body, so of course he could fuse with the earth dragon's heart. Boom! At this moment, ED was still releasing the dragon chi around him, and his aura was getting stronger and stronger. Tian even sensed that ED's strength was growing at speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, ED had reached the pinnacle of the low god realm. From mid-stage low god to the pinnacle of the low god realm, ED only used a dozen or so seconds to advance his strength by 2 small realms. This is impossible. At this moment, Luo Xian also sensed that something was wrong. Her delicate voice was somewhat ear-piercing. Her beautiful eyes flickered intensely. She couldn't believe the scene before her eyes. This kid has absorbed the dragon's heart. His strength is increasing. Liu also came to his senses and cried out in astonishment. He only has the strength of a low god. How could he possibly absorb the energy of the dragon's heart? Qi Yefeng's reaction was even more exaggerated. He was roaring almost crazily. His eyes were filled with deep viciousness and even intense killing intent. The Earth Dragon's heart originally belonged to him. As long as he could find a way to fuse with the energy contained within the dragon's heart, he could easily break through to the overgod realm the moment he unsealed the dragon vein. Unfortunately, the dragon's heart was swallowed by ED and miraculously fused with it. This series of events was unacceptable to Qi Yefeng. Bastard! At this moment, Jian Wuya suddenly roared. His eyes turned crimson and he shouted furiously. We joined forces to kill the Earth Dragon. Who does this kid think he is? How dare he swallow the dragon's heart? I will dominate you. As his voice fell, Jian Wuya's figure moved. He swung his sword at Ed. He didn't dare to kill Nye Tian, but he didn't hesitate to kill Ed. Don't! Nye Tian was taken aback. He immediately reacted. But before he could move, he felt an enormous force pressing down on him. It made him feel suffocated and unable to make a move. Moreover, given Nye Tian's strength, try to fight Jian Wuya was tantamount to courting death. Die! Jian Wuya's face was ferocious like a wild beast. He swung his sword, and a sword shadow descended like a majestic mountain, directly bombarding Ed. A swordsman in the essence of Sword Realm could unleash unimaginably terrifying power with a single strike. However, at this moment, Ed's hair was standing on end. His aura was still soaring, as though he didn't care about Jian Wuya's sword at all. Boom! In the next moment, the terrifying sword fell, bombarding Ed's aura. The space around him shook violently, and a violent force exploded. Ed, seeing this, Nye Tian couldn't help but scream. His eyes suddenly shrank, and he was very flustered. He was the one who brought Ed out. If Ed really died in Jian Wuya's hands, how could he explain it to the Demon Dragon King? Ed's identity wasn't simple. He was the next Demon Dragon King, and he had the heavy burden of reviving the Demon Dragon clan on his shoulders. Roar! The moment Jian Wuya's sword descended, the draconic chi around Ed's body abruptly became violent, faintly transforming into a gigantic black demonic dragon. Immediately after, a thunderous roar resounded through the air, as if it had the power to pierce through the clouds and shatter rocks. Boom! Suddenly, a violent wave of chi gushed out and rushed towards Jian Wuya. Jian Wuya was stunned at first, but then he reacted. He wanted to resist, but it was too late. His body was directly swept up by the terrifying chi wave, and he flew backwards, smashing heavily against the hard cliff. This sudden scene shocked everyone. Their eyes became dull, and they didn't know what was going on. Jian Wuya's killing move fell, but he was sent flying. This was too strange. What's going on with that roar of the demon dragon? Nye Tian was also dumbfounded, and his face was full of confusion. The demon dragon's heart absorbed the powerful dragon chi from the earth dragon's heart, and it's in an active state. At this time, someone attacked Ed. Of course, it would provoke the demon dragon's heart to resist. Fat Cat let out a long sigh. He had just reacted. Fortunately, the demon dragon's heart had resisted. Otherwise, with just Ed's strength, he definitely wouldn't be able to resist Jian Wuya's sword. At this time, Ed's aura began to converge, and endless dragon chi quickly flowed into his body. When the dragon chi disappeared, everything around him returned to normal. However, Ed's aura had completely changed. Even his thin body was a little stronger, and he looked incomparably sharp. Chapter 1592. Peak Mid-Level Deity. Nye Tian gasped. He was in a daze for a long time, unable to react. Ed had absorbed the power of the Earth Dragon's heart, and his strength had risen from mid-level low-level deity to peak mid-level deity. It was almost an increase of 2 major realms. And the most terrifying thing was that the increase in his strength was completed in an instant. This made those martial artists who hid in caves and cultivated bitterly for hundreds or thousands of years in seclusion feel embarrassed. Nye Tian originally thought that his strength was increasing at a terrifying speed. However, compared to Ed, it seemed a little weak. His strength. Luo Xian sensed the change in Ed's strength. Her cold voice trembled, and she was speechless for a moment. After a long time, the others reacted and looked at Ed in shock. Besides surprise, there was also a trace of jealousy in their eyes. It would be strange if they were not jealous of Ed for increasing so many realms in an instant. How is this possible? At that moment, a furious voice was heard. Jian Wuya's figure appeared. His face was as pale as paper. Obviously, the demon dragon's roar had a huge impact on him. Heaven's Sword Palace Lord, the Earth Dragon's heart has been merged with ED. You'd better calm down. Nie Tian was afraid that Jian Wuya would attack ED again. Thus, he could not help but take a step forward and speak coldly. At the same time, Nie Tian noticed that Yao Chen's figure quietly moved closer. He stared at Jian Wuya, seemingly very vigilant. Nie Tian noticed Yao Chen's actions and could not help but frown. He felt strange. Yao Chen clearly wanted to protect ED. Could there be some kind of relationship between Yao Chen and ED? Nie Tian was stunned as he wondered in his heart. Yao Chen's previous actions had already made Nie Tian feel strange. The former had stood up for Nie Tian more than once. His actions were very strange. Jian Wuya frowned. After thinking for a while, he finally put away his anger and calmed down. To be honest, he was afraid of ED and did not dare to attack casually. The Earth Dragon's heart had been absorbed by ED. It would be useless to kill ED now. Moreover, Nie Tian had Yang Zhongxiu by his side after all. It was not worth it to offend an elder of the Sacred Parliament because of this. When Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng saw Jian Wuya retreat, they could only give up. However, these people definitely had not given up on the Earth Dragon's dragon heart. Furthermore, they had guessed that there was definitely something even more terrifying than the dragon heart in ED's body. Otherwise, he would not have been able to fuse with the dragon heart so easily. Only then did Lai Yu and the others realize that Nie Tian was not the only one with heaven-defying talent. ED was also a freak. Upon seeing the four palatial lords relax, Nie Tian secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He slowly walked to ED's side and asked, "ED, are you all right?" He was worried that Jian Wuya's sword would injure ED. "Brother Nie Tian, I'm fine." ED chuckled and said, "I feel great now. It's as if I have endless energy in me." Nie Tian smiled wryly. It would be strange if he didn't feel good after rising so many levels in such a short time. "Fat, will ED be all right?" Nie Tian was still a little worried as he asked the fat cat. "Of course, he will be fine." The fat cat smiled smugly and said, "He is fused with the Earth Dragon's dragon heart. His strength will rise very quickly in the future. This brat has really stepped on dog sh*t this time." Nie Tian smiled faintly. ED's increase in strength was definitely a good thing for them. Given ED's talent and combat strength, he could now fight against mid-stage high god experts. Although ED's strength was already above Nie Tian's, his combat strength was not as strong as Nie Tian's. "Palatial lords, let's continue forward." After confirming that ED was fine, Nie Tian was relieved. He walked to the side of Lai Yu and the others and smiled faintly. Lai Yu and the others glared at Nie Tian unhappily, their expressions as ugly as they could be. Nie Tian, however, pretended that he didn't see it and looked completely at ease. Everyone had to be even more careful now. They had just entered the 9-dragon Earth Meridian and had already encountered an Earth Dragon. Who knew what else they would encounter next? Everyone continued forward with the help of the weak light. Nie Tian realized that this was a very wide passageway. The surrounding stone walls were very smooth, as if they had been polished. They did not look like they had been formed naturally. Instead, they looked like they had been artificially carved. As they walked along the passageway, Nie Tian felt more and more strange as they walked deeper in. The passageway was 10,000 meters wide and a few thousand meters high. The space was very big, and the place where the passageway led was actually slowly becoming brighter. "Lord Nie Tian, could there be people here?" At that moment, Yang Zhongxiu also seemed to sense that something was wrong. He walked to Nie Tian's side and asked softly, "People?" Nie Tian was stunned for a moment before he smiled and said, "This is 10,000 meters underground. How could there be people?" "Lord Nie Tian, I think this passageway was artificially carved. Perhaps some terrifying race lives here," Yang Zhongxiu said softly, looking extremely cautious. "Perhaps." Nie Tian smiled faintly and did not say anything more. As they continued to go deeper, Yet Tian felt a strange aura floating in the air, giving him a slight sense of oppression. Fat, do you feel anything? Yet Tian was a little worried and couldn't help but ask. Fat Cat's brows furrowed, as though he was thinking about something. His expression also became slightly strange. Niet Tian, there's a powerful seal here. Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded after a while. His expression was somewhat solemn. Seal? Niet Tian was stunned for a moment. He immediately activated the holographic divine rune and carefully sensed the surroundings. However, he did not find the slightest bit of seal aura. This is a seal left behind from ancient times. It has a strong suppressive effect on the strength of warriors. You are too weak to feel the suppressive force of the seal. It is very normal. The Fat Cat knew what was on his mind, so she explained, the restrictive spell here has a strong suppressive effect on martial artists above the middle stage of High God realm. Martial artists below the middle stage of High God realm won't feel the suppression. I see. Niet Tian nodded slightly. This seal was very similar to the abyssal seal he encountered in the 3,000 small worlds. They both had a suppressive effect on the strength of warriors. The existence of this seal was absolutely good news for Niet Tian. After what had just happened, he had witnessed the terrifying strength of the Overgod realm. However, with this seal, the strength of the four palace masters would be greatly suppressed. In this way, Niet Tian would even have a chance to fight with them. However, the next moment, Niet Tian suddenly thought of something. His expression changed, and he exclaimed, Fat, there is a seal here. Doesn't that mean that there is someone here? Even if the seal was left behind from ancient times, it proved that someone had been here in ancient times. Yes. Fat Cat nodded heavily and said, the passage here should have been built by ancient warriors. It seems that someone has visited the 9 dragon ley lines and built an underground palace here. How terrifying! Niet Tian's eyes trembled when he heard Fat Cat's words. The ancient people were indeed powerful to be able to build a palace 10,000 meters deep underground. Boom! At this moment, a violent roar suddenly came from the space, as though the earth had suddenly cracked open. Chapter 1593. What's going on? Feeling the ground suddenly shaking, someone couldn't help but cry out. Rumble! Just at this moment, the loud rumbling sound became even more intense, following which a powerful pressure was released from all around. It's the wall. Someone discovered something and cried out in fear. Eyebrows furrowed. Niet Tian glanced around, and his expression flickered. He saw that the surrounding walls were moving towards them at an extremely fast speed. It was actually shrinking the space they were in. Oh no! Niet Tian felt that something was wrong. The surrounding walls were pressing down. The space they were in was getting smaller and smaller. In the end, they would definitely be crushed to death by the 4 walls. He suddenly reacted. This must be a huge mechanism palace, so the 4 walls could be moved. The wall above is also pressing down. At this moment, Niet Xiu's voice sounded. He pointed upwards and shouted. Niet Tian suddenly raised his head. He saw that the wall above was also descending at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, the originally wide space had actually become extremely narrow. Damn it! Jian Wuya roared. His body moved, and he soared into the sky. He slashed out with his sword. The huge sword's shadow bombarded the wall above his head. However, it didn't break the wall. It only left a crack on the wall, which instantly healed. Seeing this scene, Niet Tian couldn't help but let out a long breath. The surrounding walls were actually protected by formations. The surrounding walls were made of origin stone. It was originally extremely hard, and with the support of formations, it was even more impossible to break. If Jian Wuya and the rest still had the strength of Overgod, they might be able to break the wall, but under the pressure of the restriction power, their strength had dropped to around mid-stage High God. It was impossible to break the wall. What an exquisite plan! Niet Tian suddenly came to a realization. No wonder there were restrictions here. It turned out to suppress the strength of the martial artists, and then use these mechanism walls to pressure the martial artists to death. Rumble, rumble. Violent rumbling sounds continuously sounded, The space they were in was getting narrower and narrower. The surrounding walls released a huge pressure. It was almost suffocating. In the blink of an eye, the space that originally had a radius of 10,000 meters was reduced to around 1,000 meters. I can't just sit here and wait for death, Nietion growled. At this speed, they would be crushed to death by the wall in less than a minute. Nietion underground. Fat Cat's voice rang out, reminding Nietion. Nietion's eyes flickered slightly. He lowered his head to look at his feet and felt the aura underground. It seemed like the ground wasn't formed by the origin Earth primordial stone and wasn't protected by the formation. Give it a try. Nietion's expression darkened. After that, he leapt up and punched the ground. Instantly, the shadow of a dragon appeared, rushing towards the ground. Boom! With a muffled sound, the dragon's shadow collapsed, but a huge pit appeared on the ground. It really works. Nietion cried out in surprise and shouted, "Everyone attack the ground. We need to create a tunnel underground." All right. Seeing this, Jianhuia shouted and was the first to respond to Nietion. He transformed into a sharp sword and released his sword aura. Like a drill, he dived towards the ground. Kaboom! With a loud sound, the ground was directly torn apart and a deep pit appeared. Jianhuia's figure actually went straight into it. Everyone was startled and waited for Jianhuia to come out, but the latter didn't move for a long time. Bastard! Nietion immediately realized what Jianhuia was trying to do. With a furious curse, he dug a hole in the ground and prepared to hide like a mouse. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, a dense rain of arrows suddenly shot out from the surrounding walls, sweeping towards the crowd. Be careful! Seeing this, Nietion shouted and activated the Star Soul Shield and Extreme Wind Firmament Battle Armor at the same time, protecting Yin Tian, Yang Zhongxiu, and Yeqiu. Chen Wuqing and ED were strong enough and should have the ability to protect themselves. Countless arrows came very quickly and fiercely. Some of the weaker warriors didn't have time to react and were directly shot into meat paste. Bang, bang, bang. Nietion withstood the attack of the sharp arrows. The star power and spirit power in his body were greatly consumed. He suddenly looked at Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng and couldn't help but roar. Lai Yu, Qi Yefeng, what are you waiting for? At this moment of life and death, Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng were still suspicious of each other and didn't dare to make a move. Palace Master Lai Yun, Palace Master Qi Yefeng, I will help you resist the power of the restriction. You break the ground. At this moment, Yao Qin stood out and released two strange forces from his body. It seemed to be some kind of mysterious boundary power. The boundary power enveloped Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng, helping them resist a part of the restriction power, allowing their strength to recover to the peak of High God, close to the level of Overgod. What a powerful boundary. When Nietion saw this scene, his eyes couldn't help but sink. He didn't expect Yao Chan to be so strong that the boundary he released could actually resist the power of the ancient restriction. The ancient seal was laid down by the strongest beings of the ancient era. Therefore, one could tell just how strong it was. Although Yao Qin's boundary couldn't completely resist the power of the restriction, it increased the strength of Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng. It shouldn't be a problem for them to break the ground. Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng looked at the surrounding walls that were almost within reach. After looking at each other, they didn't hesitate anymore. The two figures moved at the same time and bombarded the ground. Rumble! The two's strength recovered to the level of Overgod. When they attacked together, the ground received a huge impact. After shaking violently, it directly cracked and collapsed in all directions. In the next moment, Nietion and the others felt that they were stepping on air and their figures directly fell. Bang! Nietion stabilized his figure in the air. He looked up and saw the four walls above him colliding with each other, making a violent collision sound, like metal and stone colliding. That was close. Nietion sucked in a breath of cold air. If he had been one step slower, they would have been killed by the collision of the four walls. Those walls were made of origin stone. Perhaps even Overgod experts might not be able to withstand that kind of impact. Everyone's figures descended. Among the flying rocks, they saw a river below them. Nie Tion's figure moved nimbly and was the first to land. He stood on a boulder and looked at the river in front of him, stunned. Who would have thought that there would be a river under the ground? However, the river in front of them was completely different from ordinary rivers. What was flowing in the river was not clear water, but boiling lava. Lava lake. Fat Cat's voice sounded. She cried out in surprise and seemed a little happy. This was not a river at all, but an underground lava lake. Everyone also landed at this time. Looking at the lava lake in front of them, they were stunned. Chapter 1594. What is this place? Looking at the lava lake, Nie Tion frowned and couldn't help asking in confusion. At this moment, he suddenly understood that the light rays in the tens of thousands of meters underground were the sparks that escaped from the lava lake. At this moment, everyone had a blank look on their faces, not knowing where they had come to. Right now, there were only a dozen or so people left. Aside from the 4 palace masters, the other 4 over-gods and Luo Xian, the rest of the people were all dead. On Nie Tion's side, there were no casualties. Nie Tion, what do we do now? Jian Wuya took a step forward and questioned Nie Tion. Nie Tion had been the leader since they entered the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein. Now that they were in this godforsaken place, Jian Wuya was furious. Everyone's gazes shifted to Nie Tion in unison, waiting for his answer. Nie Tion frowned. He actually didn't know what to do next. He only knew that he was in the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein, but he didn't know what it was. Nie Tion, let's follow this lava lake and find the underground palace first. Fat Cat chuckled and said to Nie Tion at the crucial moment. Nie Tion was stunned and frowned. Fat, we're already in the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein. The aura of Mother Earth energy around us is very dense. Should we go to the source of the 9 Dragons' Earth Vein? That's right. Fat Cat laughed weirdly. Since someone has already been here and built an underground palace, we just need to find the underground palace to find the source of the Earth Vein. Yes. Nie Tion nodded and calmed down. Everyone, listen up. Let's take a break first, then walk along the lava lake. Everyone looked at each other. There was no better way. The passage above their heads was already sealed. It was impossible to go back the way they came, so they could only continue. The atmosphere was a little gloomy. Everyone sat down and rested. One had to admit that even though they were underground, the aura of Mother Earth essence energy was extremely dense. Cultivating in such an environment would yield twice the results with half the effort. After a while, everyone had more or less recovered. Nie Tion didn't delay any longer and led everyone forward. Moving forward along the lava lake, the blazing flame aura in the air became more and more intense. Everyone felt a strong burning sensation, as if they were in a furnace. While walking, Nie Tion quietly approached Yao Chun, the palace master of the Medicine King Palace. Palace Lord of the Medicine King Palace, many thanks. Nie Tion transmitted his voice to Yao Chun. Yao Chun was stunned for a moment before he replied. Nie Tion, you don't need to test me. I have no ill intentions. I just want to protect ED. As expected, Nie Tion's eyes narrowed as he cried out in his heart. He then looked at Yao Chun and asked, May I know why? Yao Chun would not protect ED for no reason. There must be an unusual relationship between the two of them. Nie Tion knew from Ming Hui that ED was an orphan and had no family. Could it be that Yao Chun was related to him? I can't tell you now, but you will know very soon. Yao Chun smiled faintly and then deliberately distanced himself from Nie Tion. The corner of Nie Tion's mouth rose slightly, but his face remained expressionless. From the previous battles, he could tell that Yao Chun's battle power might be slightly inferior when compared to Lai Yu and Jian Wuya. However, Yao Chun was a world spiritist and was extremely terrifying. If he joined hands with any of the palace masters, they could easily defeat the other two. Yao Chun's boundary master could resist the ancient restriction and restore the strength of the martial artists. If it wasn't for Yao Chun using the boundary master to restore the strength of Lai Yu and Qi Yefeng to the peak of the high god realm, everyone would be in danger. Now that he was sure that Yao Chun had no hostility, Nie Tion felt more at ease. However, he was really curious about the relationship between Yao Chun and ED. As they continued to walk forward, The flame aura in the space became more intense, almost burning everyone's skin. Big brother Nyetian, look ahead. At this time, Ed suddenly came to Nyetian's side, pointed to the front, and exclaimed. Nyetian suddenly raised his head and saw that at the end of the lava lake, there was actually a huge door formed by interweaving flames. It's a door. Nyetian frowned, and his expression became strange. He didn't expect that there would be a door of flames here. The others also saw the door of flames, and their faces became nervous. After a while, everyone came to the front of the door of flames and felt the incomparably blazing aura, as if it could burn people into nothingness in an instant. The door of flames was formed by the most blazing flames. On it surged groups of strange runes, releasing an aura that could catch people. There's no way out. Luo Xian looked at the door of flames in front of her and couldn't help but look at Nyetian. Stinking brat. Let's see where you've brought us to. Jian Huia roared angrily. Looking at Nyetian with a gloomy face, he was extremely angry. Nyetian didn't care about Jian Huia and Luo Xian. All of his divine sense was placed on the door of flames in front of him, carefully sensing the aura of the door of flames. After a long time, beads of sweat appeared on Nyetian's forehead. He let out a long breath of turbid air and frowned even more. He didn't sense any other aura from the door of flames, only the most intense flames, as if behind the door there was a sea of flames. Nyetxio, can you see anything? Nyetian came to Nyetxio's side and asked solemnly. Nyetxio's sensing ability might not be as good as Nyetian's, but he had the purple demon eyes, so he might be able to see the abnormality. Mister, this door of flames contains an extremely berserk fire attribute power. It should be a type of fire attribute divine power. Nyetxio's eyes flickered with a strange purple light. As he spoke, he tried to sense what was behind the door of flames. Unfortunately, the power of the door of flames was too strong. It had a strong effect on the perception of the purple demon eyes. He was unable to sense anything behind the door. Mister, I can't see what's behind the door. Nyetxio tried a few times. After failing, he finally gave up and said helplessly, Who cares what it is, just destroy the door. Just at this time, Jian Huia became impatient. He suddenly took a step forward. A sharp sword intent surged out from his palm. He directly slapped it towards the door of flames. Don't move. Seeing that, Nyetian cried out in fear, but it was already too late. Jian Huia had already made his move. Pooh! When Jian Huia's sword intent struck the door of flames, a strange scene occurred. The sword intent directly entered the door of flames. Like a clay ox entering the sea, it disappeared without a trace. What's going on? Seeing this scene, everyone was startled, their faces filled with doubt. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. Following that, he used his divine sense to probe. The holographic divine runes were like invisible tentacles, entering the door of flames.